This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation is still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Let's do a check here. Paul Sweeney, good morning. David Gura in for Paul Sweeney. Michael Barr, good morning. John Tucker in for is Lisa here?
She's here.
I'm here.
Yes. Okay. Very good. It's a Friday in the summer, folks.
We have a quorum.
Lots going on here. We have a quorum. That's exactly right, David. And thrilled to have you here, David, because there's some really nuanced political analysis that we have to do on international relations and, of course, on the domestic story as well. I mean, I'm looking at where we are, David, and yesterday, of course, we had the market come back nicely. Futures up 9 right now. And, you know, I look at the impact when you're on with us in the ratings. Sometimes the ratings are 10 times, 20 times,
right? Yeah.
30 times bigger as well. What do you think of the President Trump's press conference?
You know, it was familiar.
10 times,
familiar.
20 times,
Sure that
30
you felt
times
the same
better.
way. The size of the crowd and audience was likewise big, but, you know, a familiar thing that we'd seen over the course of his presidency and the campaign before, but plenty to talk about as we get into the show about what he's forecasting in terms of debates. He's agreed to them. I don't know that his opponent has, but...
Margaret Brennan with us later. What's the single thing you're focused on, David Gura's focused on to the Sunday talk shows? What's the, I hate this word, the narrative that you're going to be watching?
You know, I'll be charting sort of where the vice president is going, where she's campaigning, but for me, it's still the Middle East. I think people are still on tenterhooks, sort of wondering what might happen in retaliation for what the assassinations that Israel conducted now a few days ago. So I think Margaret's going to get into that on her show as well. We'll talk to her about that.
We'll touch on that through the morning. I want to point out Brent crude 79.32. Huge recovery in place. You may get an 80 print on Brent crude in the yield space. I'm looking at the 10-year real yield. Always 1.81%, stasis there the last couple days. But very importantly, nominal yields have really come back, 4.03 on the Paul Sweeney 2-year yield, the 10-year yield 3.95%. Lisa's going to go over all these, but the basic thing is yesterday seemed to be a healing day. So we'll have to see on that. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And futures. We've got green on the screen right now, and this is after the S&P 500 posted its best day in nearly 2 years. That was thanks to that better-than-expected jobless claims report. Helped ease those fears that the labor market is weakening. A Bloomberg survey actually says the Fed is expected to reject calls for jumbo cut in September, with most economists forecasting a 25 basis point reduction. So we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.2%, 54 points. Dow futures up 19 points. S&P futures up about 9 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.03%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.95%, and that's down 3 basis points. Paramount following the steps of Warner Brothers Discovery when it comes to cable channels. The owner of Comedy Central, MTV, Nickelodeon, it says it slashed what its cable division is worth by nearly $6 billion, even though Paramount's streaming service delivered its first ever profit. Beat-adjusted EPS estimates in the second quarter. Shares up, though, about 6%. Then you have online travel company Expedia up 10%. Better than expected second quarter results. It did warn about softening travel demand in the current quarter. And could diners be looking for healthier fast food options? We have both.
Yes, I am.
Burger King owner, you remember restaurant brands, Taco Bell parent Yum Brands, they had sales that were lower. But salad chain Sweetgreen.
Are you lecturing
your
me?
favorite, Tom? It posted sales outpaced expectations, raised its outlook for the full year. Its shares are up 23%.
Have you been to a Sweetgreen, Tom? No.
I think I went
by mistake.
once and I just stand outside.
Needed a glass of water.
I got an $18 salad. Whatever.
Dressing on the side.
There you go.
Oh, it's great. I'm surrounded by gluten-free people, folks. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. David Gura for Paul Sweeney. We get things started here, and we start strong with Andrew Hollenhorst. To review, folks, he absolutely nailed at Citigroup the idea that rates would go up farther than anybody expected. And he's reversed elegantly here in the disinflation and looks for a persistency of rate cuts. Andrew, what will you write this weekend on the measured pace of Jerome Powell's calls?
Yeah, I think what we're thinking about, what we're writing about, what we're talking about is there a measured pace of slowing in the data that is going to allow for this very gradual pace of rate cuts, which I think every central bank would like to have, a slow and gradual pace of rate cuts. I don't think that's where they're going to end up. I don't think that's what we're seeing in the data. The unemployment rate, not only did it move up in the month of July, it accelerated higher. So when you're trying to achieve a soft landing and you're accelerating through the level of unemployment where you want it to stop, I think that is where you put 50 basis points on the table. So I think they will cut 50 basis points in September, and I don't even think it's going to be a close call when we get there.
Andrew, you have been one who has exercised or advocated for some caution here on the subject of a soft landing, suggesting that the hard landing is more likely. Something else you've talked an awful lot about is just looking at the totality of the data, parroting a phrase there from the Fed chair. But when you look at jobs data or labor data in particular, looking at it holistically, we talk so much about the latest reads that we got from the Labor Department, but what are you focusing on in particular that tells you about where the economy is going directionally?
Yeah, it really is. I would say all of the data. The Fed likes to say the totality of the data, which sounds much better, but it just means look at all of it, right? And that's what we should be doing. And if you look across all of the labor market data, you see a consistent story. So there's all kinds of complication and confusion. We talk about the establishment survey where you see really strong payroll growth and then an unemployment rate that's rising, and you can't really reconcile that. But if you kind of step back and look at where all of this labor market is trending, it's trending towards a weaker labor market with hiring rates that are slowing, with hours worked that are coming down. And frankly, that looks like the start of every recession that we have on record. So it doesn't guarantee that we're going to have a recession. It probably makes it more likely than not that we are. And it means that Fed officials and policymakers generally should be thinking about that as a real possibility, not some kind of a tail risk.
Andrew, I zoom back up to look at those two reports from the Labor Department, and I wonder if you see them as aberrations. I was told we should just attribute this to Hurricane Beryl. This was weather related. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you caution otherwise, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me so much of the conversation we were having around inflation a couple of years ago, when you can always point to some kind of special story, some kind of, epicycle that you put on top of what's going on to try to make the data fit the narrative that you want to have in place. But there's a very simple narrative, which is that the labor market is slowing, and we see that consistently across a number of data points. And then there's kind of complex stories about maybe weather affected the report, despite the fact that the BLS said there's no discernible weather effect in this report. So I think you really have to kind of try hard to get to that explanation.
Andrew, we had a 3-hour meeting here yesterday at our world headquarters trying to figure out how long Lisa Abramowitz should stay at the $1 Million Cowboy Bar in Jackson Hole. I mean, I don't think she's ever been. And we got to get her in there.
This is where the bar stools are saddles.
Yeah, okay. There's video proof of this. Hey, folks, don't laugh. The gin and tonics are $7. Excuse me, the martinis are $7.
They hit harder at altitude.
Andrew Hollenhorst, what's Jerome Powell going to say at Jackson Hole? To me, his script has changed.
Yeah, I think Lisa should definitely stay for his speech. That's going to be the key event at Jackson Hole. And I really am interested to know, because I think it's going to be too early for him to say, September is going to be a 50 basis point cut, because we won't have the August jobs report yet. We'll still be waiting for that. So he'll really be looking at a lot of the data we have now. So he has to keep all options on the table. What I think he's going to do, and what I think he should do, is really talk about this idea that policy rates are at 525 to 550, above 5% policy rates, in a world where inflation has come closer to target. It's not all the way at target, but closer to target, cut out a lot of the upside risk to inflation. And then the unemployment rate has come probably through notions of full employment. It's probably above where you want it to be. So with all of that policy room, could you start making larger movements? I think just putting that idea out there, putting that kind of intellectual framework around it will be important.
What do you see for inflation next week? We've got PPI, CPI, EIEIO. What do you see for inflation next week, Andrew Hollenhorst?
Yeah, I mean, let's not take our eyes off of that. I think it's going to be softer, and that is why the focus has really shifted to the labor market and to growth, and that data is getting more attention. We have 0.18% month on month. I think the number to look for is that core CPI number is going to be less than 0.25% month on month. You have to look out to that second decimal point, because what Fed officials want to see is not where's the year on year coming in, but is that monthly annualized pace coming in consistent with something that looks like 2%.
Did they teach you at UCLA to go to 3 decimal points? Is that who do we blame
they
for
taught
this?
me the opposite. They said you don't kind of
exactly.
Overly, don't obsess over these small differences. Which, by the way, we don't measure inflation accurately to 3 decimal points. So you really do have to ask the question: should we be making policy based on these small differences? At the end of the day, we know the Fed does, so we look at them.
Andrew, one final question: should we be making policy with these small differences?
Yeah, that exactly. I mean, I think you need to look at where's the broader trend here and follow the broader trend.
Next time to 4 decimal points, Andrew Hollenworst of Citigroup. Futures up 11 with our news in New York City. John Tucker.
All right, Tom. Former President Donald Trump looking to reclaim the spotlight after the wave of Democratic enthusiasm for Vice President Kamala Harris. In an hour-long news conference at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, Trump challenging Harris to 3 debates next month on Fox, ABC, and NBC. It went after the vice president for not answering reporters' questions herself.
She hasn't done an interview. She can't do an interview. She's barely competent, and she can't do an interview. But I look forward to the debates because I think we have to set the record straight.
Until now, Trump has suggested he didn't see a need to debate Harris. Vice President Harris receiving some major support from Silicon Valley. That story from Ed Baxter.
A group of about 1,200 technology workers has pledged to back her ticket. Tech for Kamala, in a public letter calling Harris an archetypical innovator and champion of technology who worked to access STEM education, promote entrepreneurship, and close the digital equity gap. The people who signed the letter did so in personal capacities, not representing companies, but they come from companies including Apple, Meta, and Salesforce. It says it wants to mobilize the community of over 7 million workers. In San Francisco, Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
And police in Vienna this morning announcing a third teener has been arrested in connection with a foiled attack at now canceled Taylor Swift concerts. The 18-year-old was taken into custody after allegedly being in contact with the main suspect. Investigators found bomb-making materials at one of the suspect's homes. California's largest wildfire so far this year continues to grow as it chews through timber. In very hot and dry weather, the park fire scorched more than 660 square miles since erupting July 24th near the Sacramento Valley city of Chico. Global news, 24 hours a day, wherever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg. David and Tom.
I got 94% humidity. In New York City.
When I came into the building this morning, all the windows were glazed over with a thin layer of wet fog.
Singapore is 82% humidity. I've never been in Singapore when it wasn't miserable.
I woke up and the igniter sparks on the gas range were clicking, which alarmed me. But in fact, there was too much moisture in the kitchen from the windows being anyway, a little too much information there. But
it's for those of you across the nation, it's extraordinary. Our thoughts to the people down south. John, do you have any update from Rob Carolyn? And it's west of us, right?
Yeah, I'm going to hear from him in about 30 seconds. Get the update. So yeah, the gist of it is for the New York metropolitan area. It's going to be west of us, but west of us that'll get heavy rains. If you have an umbrella, hold on.
Take it from his desk, John.
I gave up buying expensive umbrellas. I get them, and 3 days later they're gone. They're left at Sephora.
He likes the glad bag.
All my umbrellas are at Sephora. That's where they end up. Futures up 11. The VIX 23.40. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen. This is after the markets got a nice push from yesterday's reading of new jobless claims, which showed signs of a stronger economy than feared. Now, some Fed officials are saying, don't get so happy so fast. The Fed's Austin Goolsbee says more data needed to assess the state of the economy. Tom Barkin says the central bank has time to assess the economy. And Fed President Susan Collins tells the Providence Journal that Fed rate cuts could be coming soon if CPI keeps falling. We've got NASDAQ futures futures up 0.3%, 60 points. Dow futures up 0.1%, 52 points. S&P futures up 0.2%, or 12 points. The 2-year yield at 4.03%. That's little change, and the 10-year yield at 3.94%. That's down 4 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,431 an ounce. Brent crude $79 a barrel. WTI crude $76 a barrel. Companies making news. That's Delta. It says it expects $380 million in lost revenue this quarter from that CrowdStrike tech outage. It forced them to cancel thousands of flights last month. Delta shares up about 0.2%. And JetBlue said to be in talks with lenders to sell $1.5 billion of junk bonds, and that would yield up to 10%. JetBlue up 0.5%. And it's about time Gap is changing its ticker symbol to GPS to GAP on August 22nd. Finally, that is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and David.
That'll change everything. They're changing their symbol.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Fine.
Symbols
Makes sense.
It's a big deal. I mean, I can't imagine how many marketing people were involved in that call. Speaking of marketing, the huge success of the Paris Olympics, our Summer Games updates, they are brought to you by State Street Global Advisors. Thank you, State Street, for... I saw some, jump off the pommel horse thingy, way up high, spin around. I'm going, how do they learn to do it? I mean, what's the crash rate while you learn to do that?
Well, I asked my brother who ran in high school and college when you learn how to do the steeplechase, or there was a heptathlon yesterday. I mean, there's some radical stuff.
Yeah, I like the traditional
I never threw
stuff.
a javelin.
No, I never threw a javelin.
Shot.
I tried the discus in high school, and they said next.
Yeah.
I've been screaming for 4 days, get me Englander. Stephen Englander is definitive and cross rates. He has a storied career on Wall Street. He's now at Standard Chartered Bank, and they have a very important Pacific Rim bias. We're thrilled that Dr. Englander could join us this morning. Stephen, here's the one question I want to ask you. I see a conflation, a correlation understood between the Japanese carry trade on wine and all of the economic back and forth in the West. I don't buy it. To me, they're much more two separate and discrete events. Are they?
I was afraid I was going to disagree with you, but I'm afraid I agree with you. I think that the big markets trade we saw in the West was basically a recession trade. That anybody looking at the unemployment rate chart on Friday said, "Wow, this looks like every other downturn in the U.S. and the unemployment rate's going to go up another 2 percentage points." I think the Japanese carry trade was a big deal for Asian currencies because the weakness of the yen had dragged down CNH, had dragged down Korean won, all its neighbors. And I think that the unwinding of that trade sort of, unwound a lot of popular trades in the FX market. But, I don't think it was like a systemic force. I think it was just, people realizing that, the yen moving 10% means that they were wrong in shorting it.
Which pair or triangulation of pairs should our listeners and viewers watch to gauge a recovery?
I think if markets really regain confidence, we'll see carry trades put back on. Maybe not against the yen, maybe against the US dollar, but we'll see Mexico perform better, we'll see Brazil perform better, Aussie perform better. Currencies that historically have been correlated with risk appetite, those are the guys I think that will, do better if the market backs away from the recession fears that, I think have diminished but have not disappeared.
Stephen, I linger on what you said. If markets regain confidence, so here we are at the end of this woolly week. How close are we to getting there? And you, having monitored what's been happening with the BOJ so closely, just get us up to speed on sort of what we should be looking forward to in the week ahead.
I think that every data point is a chance for the U.S. to be seen as falling into recession. And so I think that we had the ISM services better than expected. We had initial claims looking better than expected. So market says, okay, we get to live another day, without a recession. I think going into next week, it's retail sales, which will be very important. If it looks as if they're collapsing, that's an independent read on the recession trade. And I would say that if it does turn out we're in recession, the market is way underpriced because, as Andrew was saying a few minutes ago, we're pretty close to the inflation target. That's not an issue. If we're in recession, the Fed will do what it normally does and take real interest rates to zero. And that's like a percentage point or a percentage point lower, percentage point and a half lower than what's priced now. That's not our call, but if it does turn out that things look like they're falling sharply, the market has another round of repricing to do.
Steve, how are you looking at the prospect of that jumbo cut, as we heard Lisa say just a moment ago? This is a phrase we're hearing over and over again. I know that you've revised your forecast for the year. How are you thinking about the prospect of that happening in September?
I think, the data don't support it. Like, even though the unemployment rate chart looks terrible, if you look at the employment to population ratio, which, again, is an even broader indication of, labor market health, it's really not showing the same kind of deterioration. And obviously other pieces of data aren't. So we think the Fed is much more comfortable with 25 if they can get away with it, sequence to 25 so that, they can see how if the economy is reacting. We don't say that they'll never do 50. In fact, I think we have a 50 in Q1. But we're saying that they really want to be sure that they're not going to get head faked by the data before ramping it up.
Steve Englender, out of your Yale University combo, I can't believe I'm saying this, but on the edge of 20 years ago, it's unfair. Lisa, it's just life is unfair. Robert Schiller, Yale University, off Greenspan, irrational exuberance. Is that what we've seen in the last June and July?
It's a bit like recessions that the market has predicted, 8 out of the last 4 recessions. I think in some ways the market has, predicted or people have cited irrational exuberance 8 out of the last 4 episodes of irrational exuberance. Right. So I think you want to be careful. It depends on, how productivity is doing. And I'd say there's small evidence that maybe productivity growth is a bit better than it was. It's way too early to tell. There's a lot of hopes for technology and what it's going to do for us. The answer is we're not sure. We got to get Englender like Yardeni to say roaring 20s. That would be great. Stephen Englender, very valued as always. Stephen Englender, one of the great supporters of surveillance. Thank you so much. What'd you call jumbo what?
Jumbo cut. The jumbo cut.
The jumbo cut?
Yes. I heard Lisa. I've heard other people say this. This is the 50.
Can we say that on air?
I think so.
Like jumbo shrimp.
Yeah, right. We're dovetailing this with the fast food conversation.
So that's like a 50-beat move.
Yeah.
But I can't say beep, that's jargon.
Well,
but jumbo cut is jargon.
We'll allow it on this Friday.
What are we doing on the big take this week? You've been on fire.
I had a great conversation.
Did Ozempic.
Yes, did Ozempic. Talked to Claudia Sahm, and look, she's done a lot of kind of explainers about the Sahm rule itself. We went deep and talked about, I had no idea she was raised on a hog farm in the Midwest, how she got into economics, how the rule came about, and she describes in such vivid terms. She writes this paper, the rule is in there, she doesn't call it the Sahm rule. She goes, and Bernanke, Chrissy Romer, they're all on stage at Brookings, and they begin to refer to the Sahm rule, and just, I thought, a very delightful conversation about how she reacted to that and sort of being impaneled in the echelons of economics.
Lisa, I may be forced to listen to the big take.
Wow.
We'll show you how to do it, how to download a podcast and listen to it.
I've never done that. I've never downloaded a podcast. We are on YouTube. We say good morning to you. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. That's the #1 way you can help us here, growing each and every day. I want to say good evening to all across, the Pacific Rim, to Singapore. Feels like Singapore here. To Jakarta, good evening to you, too, as you slide into the weekend. On Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, David Gura and Tom Keene. Stay with us, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks just trying to hold on to that comeback after a rough week. We have NASDAQ futures, little change, only up 7 points. Dow futures, little change. Same for S&P futures right now. We have the 2-year yield at 4.03%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 3.95%, and that's down 3 basis points. Nothing on the economic calendar for today. Investors now await next week's data, which includes reports on U.S. consumer inflation, retail sales. In Asia, the stock rally lost some momentum. The yen temporarily resumed its rise. Right now, we'll check in with the yen, up about 0.1% at 147.06 against the dollar. Analysts at BNY Mellon, they say that unwinding of yen-funded carry trades has further room to run. JP Morgan says the BOJ will avoid raising rates again anytime soon, with further tightening probably dependent on the fate of the U.S. economy. Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing revenue jumped 45% in July from a year ago. Strong demand for those AI chips. ADR's up about 3%. And sources say ByteDance is getting ready to refinance a $5 billion loan. It's one of the largest such deals for Chinese borrowers this year. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and David.
Well, Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Futures up to a little lift here, as Lisa mentioned. I do want to point out the VIX, 22-ish. Up to 28-ish, round trip down to 23.69. We'll see how that unfolds.
How do you define quiescent? You always say a quiescent.
Quiescent.
What's the range for that?
Direct steal from Chairman Greenspan. Quiescent used to be 16, 17, 18, and in the new regime it's 12.
Gotcha.
And so the new 20. Why are you having Walker's cookies? I mean,
for old time's sake, I picked up a few of these for you. The shortbread
they're
fingers.
un-American. Like each cookie has a stick of butter.
Yeah.
Do you know they once contacted me?
They did.
I was talking to Walker's.
They wanted to sponsor the show.
They sent me a case of Walker's.
The bow tie shaped Walkers.
They didn't make it back to America.
Well,
I was
enough.
in London, and they were all eating.
A lot of tested out on the way.
London. We're going to start an important conversation here. David Gura with encyclopedic knowledge of the American political system, and it starts strong. David Gura with Zach Cohen.
Zach, great to have you with us. Zach Cohen covers Congress for Bloomberg Government, and always great to speak with you. I mentioned a moment ago, big weekend for campaigning. Kamala Harris has been on the campaign trail an awful lot. Donald Trump heading to Montana. Let's start there. He got some criticism during that press conference yesterday for not being out on the trail as much as his opponent. What was his response to that, and why is he going to this county in Montana that I think went for Joe Biden the last time around? What does he see as the kind of possibility for him and the Republican Party in the great state of Montana?
Well, Montana certainly isn't competitive at a presidential election level, but it's hosting a really key Senate race. He's actually going to be campaigning with the Republican nominee for Senate there, Tim Sheehy, a former government contractor and firefighter. That race could determine control of the Senate. He's running against Senator Jon Tester, chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, one of the most vulnerable incumbents up for re-election this cycle, actually. In fact, the polling at this point shows Sheehy leading Tester, and in a narrowly divided Senate, where it's essentially already going to be 50-50 with the loss of the West Virginia Senate race. With Joe Manchin's retirement, Montana could tip the scales and give Republicans an outright majority regardless of who wins the White House. And so, Trump obviously had, there's no love lost between Trump and Tester. There's a long history there. But certainly Montana is an opportunity to not just, appeal to a base crowd in a place like Montana, but also a place to try to build a governing majority, and which, of course, you need the Congress in order to do that.
How does a guy like Jon Tester, Senator Jon Tester, view Kamala Harris's pick to be her running mate? How does he see Tim Walz, and what does that mean for the calculus in his home state, having Walz on the ticket?
And Tester is one of the people, every time I've talked to him about this, he says, I'm focusing on my own race. He's focusing on his efforts to actually rebuff the Biden-Harris administration in a couple of places on things like firearm access, Paraguayan beef imports, of all things, sort of the hometown issues that Montana voters care about. His campaign ads are all about public lands and accusing Sheehy of being from out of state and trying to enrich himself with government contracts, as I mentioned earlier. And so that's the path to victory for Tester, somebody who has a long record in the state of being a Montanan and trying to avoid the top of the ticket. I'd be shocked if he even shows up in Chicago for the
Paraguayan beef exports.
I was going to say, you two guys get going. I feel like I'm on a cable TV program. Paraguayan beef exports? You two would bring the bar conversation. Get the Capitol Grill in Washington. Gura and Cohen would bring the conversation to a halt.
It's not grass-fed.
Zach, Amy Walter, Cook Political Report. I believe it's this morning, maybe last night. Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada move from lean Republican to toss-up. That's really where we are in the Sunday talk shows. All of a sudden, it's a toss-up election.
Certainly. I mean, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, always really competitive. I think it's part of the reason why Mark Kelly was on the short list to be Harris's running mate, the senator from Arizona. That might be one way to try to boost turnout there. Arizona, in recent memory, basically had every Republican office holder, or every statewide office holder was a Republican. Georgia obviously flipped 2 Senate seats not just 4 years ago when Biden managed to carry the state. And then Nevada had the closest Senate race of the entire map in 2022. And so certainly no surprise there that these are the really critical states. And so Nevada, I think especially, it's got a Senate race there. Jackie Rosen is up for re-election. It'll be really critical for Democrats to try to boost turnout in Las Vegas and Clark County and try to keep down their margins elsewhere. But that's going to be a tough race. Actually, Rosen's one of the few that Trump called out in his Milwaukee speech as an incumbent that he'd like to beat in November.
Pro tip, David, seriously. How do you and Zach Cohen and your brethren, how do you remember all the names?
I don't remember them as well as Zach does, but he's living it.
How do you do it?
You got to use seeing them on that hill.
All I got to worry about is LIBOR OIS. And that's it. Save us again with Zach Cohen here.
Zach, I'm going to guess that you, like I, before the U.S. played Serbia yesterday in basketball in Paris, maybe watched this press conference at Mar-a-Lago, and something that came up with the prospect of these debates happening over the next 4 to 6 weeks. Donald Trump saying that he'd agreed to 3 of them. What is the likelihood of that happening? Just because I got to clear the calendar if they are in fact going to happen, and why are these so important to him now? Why has he had this kind of change of tack toward these debates?
It does sound like there's at least going to be one debate on ABC, I believe, on September 10th. And so that'll be sort of the first opportunity that we're going to see Trump and Harris side by side in a debate, something I'm sure Harris has been looking forward to since she ran for president in 2020. And there might be another debate beyond that with NBC later in September. The Harris's campaign has ruled out a third debate that Trump has pitched to be on Fox News, obviously much more of a conservative news channel. And so we might see more past September, but at least that ABC-NBC debates are the ones in play right now. Trump had said that he didn't want to debate Harris as long as she was the presumptive nominee, which was the sort of weird 2-week stretch where she clearly had the delegates and the support of the party members that really decide these things when there aren't primaries to do so. But now that delegates have made her the nominee actually in advance of Chicago in order to make the ballot, she is the bona fide nominee, and it creates an opportunity to have this discussion.
Zach, I'm in charge of dumb questions here. Will there be a vice presidential debate?
There will be a vice presidential debate between Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. In fact, Walz has already made pretty clear he's looking forward to that particular contest. And that'll be a really fascinating lineup between, 2 military veterans with very different worldviews who both are trying to appeal to the heartland, to the Midwest, which are really key battleground states. Right. Maybe not so much Minnesota, but places like Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan that could decide not just the White House, but Congress.
One more question. What's the one race I should read in on this weekend? In the Zach Cohen world, what's the one race where I should try to be on the edge of David Gura?
Make it as esoteric as possible so we can
my colleague Maeve Sheehy actually just wrote a really nice preview of Ilhan Omar's re-election race in Minnesota. Their primaries are coming up on Tuesday. Omar, obviously a member of the Squad, very progressive, very critical of Israel. This primary will be the next test of whether, after the fall of Jamal Bowman in New York, Cori Bush in Missouri, whether supporters of Israel are able to oust some of their most vocal critics in Congress.
Zach Cohen, thank you so much. Hugely beneficial. Really, really appreciate it. Gura Cohen, folks, you can't do better than that. That was John Tucker. It was almost informed, unlike my hackneyed
I was taking
efforts.
notes.
You were taking
notes over here.
This is good. Red and green in the screen, small caps, fractionally greener, to say the least. VIX 23.88. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, let's start off with the remnants of Tropical Storm Debbie. They have moved north. Now a tornado watch has been posted for counties in New Jersey and New York State west of New York City. That watch in effect until 2 p.m. We've already seen twisters associated with the storm. One tornado touched down near Wilmington, Delaware last night.
There was many reports made of damage to houses, such as trees down, pole and wires down.
That's Michael Edwards with the Emergency Management of Newcastle County. Storm's also damaging several homes near Washington, D.C. Now, what's left of Debbie will accelerate through Pennsylvania and upstate New York today, and then into New England, dumping more than up to 6 inches of rain. The New York metropolitan region likely to get very gusty winds starting this morning. Former President Donald Trump, as you just mentioned, he's agreed to 3 debates with Vice President Kamala Harris next month. Trump had previously suggested he didn't see a need to debate Harris, but in that hour-long news conference in Mar-a-Lago, the former president said he expects to debate her September 4th on Fox, September 10th on ABC, and on NBC September 25th.
I just look forward to these debates. I think it's very important that we have them. I hope she agrees to them.
After Trump's news conference, Vice President Harris said she has already agreed to one of them.
I'm glad that he's finally agreed to a debate on September 10th. I'm looking forward to it, and hope he shows up.
But a Harris campaign official says the vice president won't agree to an earlier debate on Fox. The campaign says it will discuss future debates if Trump appears at the ABC debate September 10th. And a third teenager arrested in connection with a foiled attack on the now-canceled Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna. The 18-year-old taken into custody after allegedly being in contact with a main suspect. Authorities say the plot appeared to be inspired by Islamic State and al-Qaeda. Investigators did find bomb-making materials at one of the suspects' homes. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg. David, Tom.
Thanks so much. This is really important, folks. Just say good morning. Good morning, Jared Corrigan. Up in Portland as well. It's 8 miles from Damariscotta to Wiscasset. But you don't have to go to Wiscasset for a decent lobster roll. You can go to the lobster hall in Damariscotta and do just as good as Red's, right?
I would agree. And you make this drive and you go through Wiscasset, beautiful town. Not throwing shade at Wiscasset, but the line to get into Red's stretches like
across
the bridge.
Almost to New Hampshire.
It's incredible. And I have not braved the line, but every time we pass it in the car, often at a slow pace because it's causing so much backup.
Yeah.
I wonder, could it be better?
It looks like a Taylor Swift concert.
It does,
Red's.
yes.
And the lobster hall, I mean, Damariscotta, folks, is like a movie set town. You can't turn left on the little main street.
One of the twin
villages. But off on
villages.
Elm Street is a lobster hall.
Yes.
Do you have the traditional, or do you have the Crapster Jumbo lobster
I go
roll?
traditional, but you bring all this up because I'm headed there. It's camp pickup. My brother-in-law, an oyster farmer in Damariscotta, so there'll be lobster, but there'll be oysters
There'll
as
be
well
oysters
on the
as
half
well?
shell. Oh yes.
Is that every single trust fund starts at oyster farm, right?
Every day we'll have. I'll bring some back for you if you want. I mean,
Please?
they'll keep. I'll fill the cooler. We'll have
Cooler.
Paul will eat a few.
No, I'm
John,
waiting
you?
for an invitation to actually go up
to go up there. Yeah.
What does one pair
take
with these dishes?
Pair with them?
Ooh, oysters.
Anything with some fermentation will work, but
It's got to be a
some local
craft
beer. Yeah, craft beer.
It's got to be something, unpronounceable.
Yeah. Oxbow, my favorite brewery in the area.
Yeah.
Big outpost in Portland, but one just outside Damariscotta as well. And then Odd Alewives, a great beer and pizza place in Nobleboro. We're getting into pretty granular detail here.
Good morning.
Tom, are you coming with me?
Block
You're riding
Island.
shotgun on the drive up? It's a Honda Odyssey.
just,
We've got some room.
If you're going to have the cilantro lime lobster roll at the lobster hall in Damariscotta, you got to go with the Narragansett lager beer.
Yes, of course.
I mean,
from one friend to another.
Deep South, deep Southern. We are here, folks, on a Friday.
We are here on a
David Gura is here, and we hope you have a good lobster roll. They're almost reasonable in Maine, unlike $87 on the Hamptons.
It is like a highway robbery.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Futures negative. We just turned the market red. That's what we did. Futures -5. Dow futures
Boiled.
at -23. Bitcoin on a tear. Seriously here. Bitcoin to 50-something. Now up to 61,000 on Bitcoin. So that's been a real recovery. Other than that, pretty much Friday stasis, which is maybe what we all need to get to the weekend and regroup. Important inflation data next week. From New York City on YouTube, on Apple CarPlay, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, it looks like the excitement from yesterday's jobless claims report kind of losing its steam right now. NASDAQ futures down 0.1%. Dow futures, little change, down about 13 points. S&P futures, little change, down about 3 points. We have the 2-year yield, 4.03%, down 1 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.94%. That's down 4 basis points. Commodities, we have spot gold lower, 2,426 an ounce. Brent crude, $79 a barrel. WTI crude, $76 a barrel. To currencies, we have the dollar stronger, Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin up nearly 2%, 60,686. Well, you could soon see more Kia Souls on the road. Amazon, it's added those little boxy vehicles to the company's delivery service partner initiative. And billionaire Larry Ellison buying a luxury hotel in Palm Beach, the Palm Beach Resort and Spa. No word on how much you paid for it. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and David.
Lisa, thanks so much. David Gura, The Big Take here. It's a podcast. We do it. Do you do it every day?
I'm not hosting every day. Sarah Holder doing this with me. We kind of alternate days. So I'd say three days a week. I got to prep for these appearances.
Town? No, it's not Hollywood.
Yeah.
And this was Bowling Green?
Yes, I think a lot of people would think that the highest incidence of people on these weight loss drugs would be in Hollywood or New York.
Rodeo Drive.
No, Bowling Green, Kentucky, just north of Nashville. You know it, but yeah.
A lot of people hang there.
Yeah, and I think it's like 4% of the population. A lot of bluegrass, yes.
Do they have the highest obesity rate? Is that what?
They have a lot of obesity in Kentucky. Exactly right. You've homed in on him.
Yeah, okay. Well, there it is. The Big Take. Look for it on Bloomberg Podcasts, on Apple Podcasts as well.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front page is a Lisa Mateo Hour. It's brought to you by IBKR. Financial advisors switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey. Custody solutions, no ticket charges, no conflicts of your interests at IBKR.com/RIA, IBKR.com/RIA. David, this is where we do witty stories with Lisa Mateo.
I love the witty.
Which I started out and I said, why are we doing this? And this is the most popular thing we do.
Absolutely.
You know you love it.
In our 6 hours of broadcast, this is the single best idea.
3 of which got on air.
Lisa, what do you got for us today?
All right, well, Olympics fever, right? You see all the athletes getting their medals everywhere, right?
If you do breakdancing, I'm walking out of the studio.
Just you wait. That's the next hour. No, I'm kidding. But the Olympics is doing something different. For the first time in Paris, they're actually giving medals to those Olympians that were beaten by competitors that were found to be doping. So these people have been waiting for years and for years. This happened yesterday. You had a handful of figure skaters from the U.S. and Japan. They were from the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. They're finally getting their medals because of that. That was happening. And then today you have 10 athletes being honored medals as far back as the 2000 Summer Olympics. So this has been a big problem with the Summer Olympics, the doping scandals, and when these athletes can really start to get their medals. And it's starting to happen now.
I saw this yesterday. It was in the Trocadero Gardens, I think, in Paris, and very emotional.
Yes,
I mean, they've waited a long time for it, and I think some people carried on with their lives. They're no longer competing, retired, now came back for it. But a beautifully done. I've enjoyed all the Olympics, Tom. I don't know about you, but I think Paris has done well.
And what I've learned here, I think I've mentioned this, folks, is I'm loving watching it on YouTube. I'm just loving it. They dope me here. It's part of the thing they do.
Kind of doping.
And they found juniper berries, cardamom, meadow
all the botanicals. All the botanicals. Yeah.
That's serious stuff. And there's a lot of this going on, Lisa, right?
Oh, for years and for years it's been going on. So they're trying to crack down. They're hoping this kind of brings light to it. But there could be another Olympic sport coming up. You may like this one. It's competitive hobby horse riding. It's coming to America. Okay. Stay with me here because we have pictures to show on YouTube. So, but when you hop on the stick and you do the stick horse, okay? So it's coming to Michigan tomorrow. Reportedly the first time in the U.S. Here's some pictures of what it looks like if you're tuning in on YouTube. Please enjoy this.
Yes.
About 125 people are going to this Michigan competition.
And these are adults.
Yes. Okay. 8-hour competition. You have dressage. It's this multi-step routine set to music, so they do all this.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Dressage. Thank you. You would know this. Barrel racing, when they move in this pattern around the cylinders, and then jumping over poles like you see the dogs do in the competitions. But these are like 3.5 feet high.
Program note here. Speaking of dressage, we make jokes about it, but Katherine Greifeld is world class in dressage. We make jokes, but unfortunately, she and Gus the horse are the real deal.
Yes.
And she was scheduled to be with us today. Do you know I've been to Paris 5 times and I've yet to get on Alan Ducasse's boat in the River Seine? You go down. It's like Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant. And you have wine and overpriced champagne. Greifeld, as we speak, let me get it out here. It's 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
She's getting dressed right now in the Celine Louis Vuitton thing to go on the damn boat tonight that I'd never been able to get on. So we'll have Katherine Greifeld on as we can, dressage champion.
Dressage. I
dressage.
love that.
Hobby horse.
A hobby horse. It's not a joke, though. I mean, it's a real sport. They hire trainers, and some of them are getting serious injuries from it, too. It's very dangerous.
Getting injuries from it.
I would buy you a ticket on that boat if you try this, Tom. I might even chip in for the flight.
I would pay to see that.
Next.
Okay. This one's a doozy for my husband, who is addicted to online shopping.
Okay.
An Amazon deal lets shoppers buy products on TikTok and Pinterest without having to leave the app. So it's making it easier for you to shop. It's this new partnership that they're doing. So you link your profile from TikTok and Pinterest to your Amazon account, and then you buy directly from the ads. It's a click, and that's all it is.
Sort of like what Instagram was doing, but even easier.
Easier.
Now, let's do this tangential, Lisa, to this week, where we saw the collapse of the drugstores. To me, all the stuff you used to buy at the drugstores, you're now buying on Amazon. Am I wrong?
You can buy anything on it.
It's so funny because it seems so easy already. I'm a little worried you take down any barrier to doing this. You know, if I can just click the picture.
Where are we in 5? Seriously, where are we in 5 years, folks? Is what I would say. I mean, you know, you used to go to CVS, Duane Reade, Walgreens, whatever, and
you don't
need to.
You order Amazon.
No, I know from my kids' bill. I get the bill all the time from Amazon. It's all these things, and you can get in the pharmacy, and it's all on Amazon.
when you run out of like the wax or stuff you put on a fiddle bowl, you go to Amazon.
Oh yeah, for the rosin.
The rosin.
Yeah,
it's like a picture.
Yeah, and then it's there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Might even be there today. I mean, you can get it so quickly.
One day, whatever. Yeah. Next, what do you got?
Last one, Disney reportedly wants to spend at least $5 billion in the UK over the next 5 years to make movies, TV shows. So this is something new from the Financial Times. Yeah, they spoke to their European boss because you had Deadpool and Wolverine, right? Huge success so far. It's
Superhero.
That was filmed in UK's Pinewood Studios.
Huh.
So that's one of the things. They use it to make a lot of their films. They've spent about $3.5 billion the past 5 years to make
Game of Thrones did a lot there.
Did it? Okay, it did a lot there. They have 4 films already being scheduled, finished to work there.
Interesting.
The Skywalker Saga movie series, that was filmed there too. But it's not just that. I mean, it's a Disney Plus. It's National Geographic.
Shogun for Hulu. So much of what we think is Japan was north of Vancouver.
Oh, see.
What is your movie diet like, Tom? We know a lot about your reading. You know, Robert Kaplan and whatnot, but what's your movie diet? What do you like to watch?
My movie diet is basically a gunpoint. We're watching a movie, or you know, we're watching a movie.
An 8-part series.
It's really actually right now really sad.
Yeah.
I you know, compared to most people
it's
consuming.
hard, you know.
You're not going to see the Deadpool?
No, I may for Hugh, but you know, I don't. You know, I'm like,
I'm going to go see it this weekend.
What's sad is there's a great chart this week. I'll give credit to the Wall Street Journal. Paul and I talked about it. It's irrefutable. People are going to the movies less. I mean, it's...
Because you can watch it at home.
We're all at home. I did watch, at gunpoint, I had to watch Red 2.
Red 2.
With Bruce Willis. And it was, you know, it was what it is. Star turn Helen Mirren's in it. But it was beautifully executed. I was shocked at, like, the camera angles, the editing, frame to frame. They took a lot of care in it. And it made like $100 gajillion.
Yeah.
But, you know, that was great. Okay. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much for the newspapers and a Hobby Horse special.
Hobby Horse special.
Okay, Gura picked the music. It's all I can say. Cy Benson's in the control room going, what? Lumineers, good morning. Bloomberg Surveillance, stay with us.
I can ride somebody's soul. I belong with you, you belong with me, you're my sweetheart. I belong with you, you belong with me, you're my sweetheart.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in that fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. David Gura in for Paul Sweeney. I'm Tom Keene. John Tucker in for Michael Barr. He's John Tucker. And Lisa Mateo with us on a Friday to get you to the weekend, to set up for mid-August, into late August, into Jackson Hole, and beyond. We welcome all of you worldwide. We're on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out on YouTube. Humbled by the growth there. Good morning, good evening, I should say. Across all of the Pacific Rim, I was told by our YouTube team. I've got a YouTube. They all wear black. Everybody's from Brooklyn. Yeah. They all wear black. They all listen to the Lumineers, the Milk Carton Kids, and the rest. They're also damn earnest, our YouTube team, and they say Asia's ginormous.
That's true. It's true. Podcasting like, as well. Huge audience, a lot of growth.
Huge.
Yes.
And over to India as well, which I guess is the biggest. So it's good morning to all of you listening in the evening and into the weekend in India and across the Pacific Rim as well. On Apple CarPlay. David, what are we doing? We got Margaret Brennan coming up. Help me here. What do I need to talk to Margaret about?
Margaret Brennan with a big interview. She's got J.D. Vance on the show this weekend. Eager to talk to her just about what he's thinking about the path forward. And
Costa has Biden.
Yes, that's right.
What's in the air
CBS
there?
Sunday Morning. I mean, that's the first interview that Joe Biden has done since he stepped aside, decided not to run again. Of course, Bob Costa, just a wonderful, deeply sourced political reporter, and I think all of us looking forward to that conversation.
What's your question to J.D. Vance right now?
Why is he making such a big deal about Walz's military record? Why is he not talking about the difference between the two campaigns?
Okay. See that, Lisa? That's like an informed question, unlike.
What would your question be?
My question to him would be, what about the protocol of walking across the tarmac to see anybody on Air Force One?
Yeah.
There's no way. From a security basis,
just wander.
Is there somebody in his ear going, "Sir, there's a Secret Service problem"?
Yeah.
Like, so, what do you do? Just walk up to Air Force One?
He tried.
I don't think so. Okay, there's our political topic.
That's all we got.
Lisa Mateo's here to save the hour from the Interactive Broker Studios with our Bloomberg Business Flash.
Maybe not. I'd ask him if he likes Diet Mountain Dew, if he really does like it. That was the story going. Yeah. Yes. Not much moving in futures after the S&P 500. It posted its best day in nearly 2 years. That was thanks to that better-than-expected jobless claims report. Really helped ease those fears that the labor market is weakening. A Bloomberg survey says the Fed is expected to reject calls for that jumbo cut in September, with most economists forecasting a 25 basis point reduction. So right now we have NASDAQ futures down about 0.1%, 23 points. Dow futures little change, down 15 points. S&P futures little change, down about 4 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.03%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.94%, and that's down 4 basis points. Warner Brothers has been in the spotlight, but now it's Paramount's turn. Adjusted EPS the second quarter beat expectations. The company took an impairment charge of nearly $6 billion on its cable networks. It also announced a 15% cut to its U.S. workforce. Their shares up 4%. Online travel company Expedia, they're up 9%. Second quarter results beat expectations. Key metrics, room nights growth, that was in the spotlight. And moving the markets, yes, it's salad chain Sweetgreen. Shares up now 24%. Sales outpaced expectation. Also raised its outlook for the full year. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and David.
What's the Sweetgreen difference? I mean, you guys are, Lisa, you're there like
salad.
8 days.
All salad?
That's it.
Only salad?
Yes, only salad.
But a wide variety.
Is that they do so much that everything's fresh all the time?
Very fresh,
yes, it's very fresh.
I get the bowl, the Harvest Bowl. Which has a lot of good protein, some goat cheese.
Oh, it's so good.
The Harvest Bowl.
With some nice greens. Delicious.
See, this is the difference.
I'm sorry to play to every cliched sense of myself Tom has.
Michael's chowing down
Yeah.
the sirloin cut burger, and Gura's over
Jack
Sweet
Spratt
Greens
and his wife here,
having
Bloomberg Surveillance.
the Harvest Bowl.
Yeah.
Paul Donovan's having a full English. He joins us right now. Paul Donovan was an intern at UBS. It's one of the great Wall Street stories worldwide. And all I can say, folks, is the reason for you to be on LinkedIn is the accessibility and brilliance of Paul Donovan of UBS, available on LinkedIn. Paul Donovan, good morning. What are you going to write about this weekend?
Well, I think the labor market's got a lot of attention. And I think the fact that the labor markets across developed economies are changing, that to me is quite relevant. Things shifts in composition, it makes data less reliable. So, understanding what's really going on there, I think is going to be important.
Absolutely brilliant. I 100% agree. But if we decompose labor, we have a combined central bank policy. How do central bankers execute efficacious policy if they're looking at a combined labor market instead of the partitions, for example, in the United Kingdom?
Well, I think the challenge for central bankers, of course, is that as we're going through this period of upheaval, certain groups in society are going to feel that things are just stacked against them. That's very, very common. And yet central bankers have got to judge sort of the macroeconomic picture as a whole. Monetary policy is a particularly blunt instrument when you're looking to control an economy. It's the cost of credit on average in an economy. There's a limit to what you can do to sort of finesse how certain groups may be feeling. Groups that are vulnerable as upheaval comes around, or groups that are doing very, very well as they're taking advantage of the technological changes that are coming through. So it's a really tricky thing, and I think that central banks need to make clear that this isn't the Greenspan era. They're not omnipotent. They can't control everything. That actually politicians have got to step up and do their stuff as well.
Paul, what is your counsel for an investor who's watched what's happened this week and noted, I think rightly, that so much of it has been divorced from the real world economy, from economic fundamentals? So much hysteria, so much uncertainty about what's going on. What's your counsel to someone sort of bewildered by all that's happened this week?
Look, I think in the longer term, economic fundamentals will out. I mean, economics is life. Economics is everything. This is why economists are so vital to the future of human civilization. So you've got to focus on the economic fundamentals over the longer term. If you want to speculate, you want to day trade, then fine. Gamble however you want. But if you want to invest, for your future, focus on the fundamentals, focus on the near term, only as a distraction. Look instead at where are the long-term trends going. This up and down in the near term, doesn't matter whether it's good news or bad news, it's just noise. Fundamentals are going to drive any investment over the medium term. That's what investors focus on. Speculators, different matter. But investors look at the economics.
Look, Paul, Tom says to sign up for your daily writings. I've done that. I'm reading what you're writing. You describe this kind of eerie calm that's descended on the economic calendar. So to pick up on what you were just talking about, what are the moments that are coming up next week, the data releases that you kind of give paramount importance to that I should be paying the closest attention to?
Well, actually, I think a certain amount of this is going to be around central bank commentary, because we had, honestly, a rather hysterical reaction, I think, to one really rather dubious and subjective data point, namely the employment report. And so what we're now going to be looking for, I think, is a calming language coming out of the Fed. So Fed speakers next week, I think, are going to be quite important. Now, a dose of cynicism doesn't go amiss here. We're going to have a certain amount of cheerleading. The economic pom-poms are going to be out up and down as they're going to sort of say, everything's fine with the economy, because, of course, that's what they're paid to say when markets are misbehaving like this. But I think getting a general sense of the reaction of the central bank and trying to get some kind of medium-term framework. This is what's been so lacking from the Powell Fed. There's no type of medium-term strategy, because, of course, Powell isn't an economist. So that, I think, some kind of sense about where they're going, not just in the September meeting, but over the next 6 to 12 months. That would be really helpful, I think.
Paul, got a major storm in America. We got to run to that right now. Please, 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 can we get you on again soon? Paul Donovan, I can't say enough about his work. See it out on LinkedIn, a huge plus for his at UBS. Futures at negative 11. With our news in a special edition in New York City, John Tucker.
We'll call this our storm edition. Tornado watch in effect for counties in New Jersey and New York State that are west of Manhattan until 2 this afternoon. Let's get the update as the remnants of Tropical Storm Debbie march north up the eastern seaboard. Rob Carolyn, Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn, joining us live. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Rob. Hey, give us the update. Just how powerful is this storm, the remnants that we're seeing right now?
Well, the big problem, John, is the rain. We're seeing numerous flash flood watches and even some flash flood warnings now stretching up the Shenandoah River Valley into Pennsylvania and central New York. A lot of the warnings that we've seen for flooding have been occurring around the Washington, D.C. area, northward of Washington, and then up towards the areas west of Philadelphia. The Storm Prediction Center a little while ago put up a tornado watch, kind of extended it from northern Virginia all the way into eastern Pennsylvania, and as you mentioned, some of the counties west of New York City and New Jersey. Anytime you get a landfalling tropical weather system, because of the turning motion associated with that storm, there's turning in the atmosphere. So any of the thunderstorms that fire up through 2 o'clock this afternoon, they do have the potential for some rotation and the ability to produce some weak tornadoes. So that's why we're concerned in the corridor stretching from northeastern Virginia right up through eastern Pennsylvania and into western New Jersey, that there could be some short-lived weak tornadoes through early afternoon.
All right, that's the key word there for us, everybody listening. Weak, right?
Yes, they wouldn't be powerful. The system's moving so quickly. Any tornadoes that would form really wouldn't get the chance to become supercell tornadoes. They'd be the weaker variety, and on the ground for just a couple of minutes.
Help us here, and this is very important. I mean, Rob Carolyn, if you have children in Damariscotta, Maine this weekend, Debbie's like there with 6 inches of rain. I mean, David Gura, it's going to be a perfect weekend in Maine. Thank you, Tropical Storm Debbie.
Actually, it's going to be gorgeous in Maine this weekend, Tom, because what's happening is Debbie is riding up ahead of a cold front, and as it's converted into a low-pressure system, it's going to take that front, grab it, and sweep it through the northeast. So the rain in Maine exits by early afternoon. It turns sunny, and it's gorgeous on Sunday. And many of the areas from Buffalo to Albany to New York to New England will be gorgeous starting by midday on Saturday and then beautiful through Sunday.
It'll be gently on the plane. Please, John Tucker,
Absolutely.
one more question to
Carolyn.
Carolyn.
So give us the rainfall totals, if you can, that we've seen already and the expectation. Because
so far,
yeah.
I was going to say, John, the heaviest rain has been generally in 2 spots along the I-95 corridor from central Virginia up through Washington and then west of Washington. They've had between 2 and 3 inches of rain. They may see another inch or 2 over the next 12 hours. And then further to the west, ahead of where Debbie's old circulation is, from the central Shenandoah Valley on up through about Hagerstown, Maryland, then through central Pennsylvania into the Finger Lakes region of New York and central New York, that area could end up with as much as 3 to 6 inches of rain from what's left of Debbie.
I got 8 more questions as usual with Rob Carolyn. We're out of time. Rob Carolyn, just the best. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Yeah,
Thank
doing
you so
fantastic work through that. He's just such a valuable member of our team. And it was like, I said this before, but the air is so thick.
It's like Singapore.
It's not hot out, but it's so humid.
It's like Singapore.
And when we came into the building this morning at 0 o'clock, all the windows were fogged over from the inside.
He has been squeegeeing when he's not been on air with us. I've
Even
seen
the
him
fish tanks.
Oh my gosh!
Had a little layer
My
of
hair was
foggy
out to
water.
here when I walked in the building.
Lisa, we noticed.
We had like 6 makeup people trying to fix
I'm
Lisa's
telling you,
hair this
it's
morning.
a lot of work.
I looked at my hair and they said, "Give it up." You know. So thank you, Rob Carolyn there with John Tucker, a value add for all of you across the nation. This is here, futures at negative 11, Dow futures at negative 40, and the VIX 24.00 from New York City. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red on the screen after the market got a nice push from yesterday's reading of new jobless claims, which actually showed signs of a stronger economy than feared. But some members of the Fed say this report isn't the end all. You said the Fed's Austin Goolsbee said more data is needed to assess the state of economy. Then when it comes to rate cuts, you had Fed President Susan Collins tells the Providence Journal it could be coming soon if CPI keeps falling. And the Fed's Jeffrey Schmidt said that it's not ready to support a rate cut with inflation above the target. So we get to NASDAQ futures, down 0.2%, 43 points. Dow futures, little change, down 25 points. S&P futures down about 0.1%, 7 points. We have the two-year yield at 4.03%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year down 3.94%, down 4 basis points. Commodities, spot gold lower, $2,427 an ounce. Brent crude $79 a barrel. WTI crude $76 a barrel. Companies making news, that's Delta. It says that CrowdStrike tech outage that forced them to cancel thousands of flights, well, it could cost them $380 million in lost revenue this quarter. We have Delta. It was up, now it's down about 0.5%. And JetBlue said to be in talks with lenders to sell $1.5 billion of junk bonds that would yield up to 10%. JetBlue up about 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and David.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Our Olympic coverage, the Summer Games updates. They're brought to you by State Street Global Advisors. Jason Trennert with us here recently, and again, hugely coveted is Strategas Research. We protect the copyright of all our guests. Go to Strategas Research to read the chiseled deck from Thomas Tesouris, Director, Head of Fixed Income Research for Trennert and Strategas Securities. You hold a clinic in your report on effective conditions. What are effective conditions?
Well, very simply, it's how easy or tight is monetary policy effectively. I mean, we can look at the Fed funds rate and say, oh, policy's tight, it's 5.5%. But that really only encompasses one portion of the curve and really only the Treasury market. You've got to look at the broader conditions. One way we do that is you look at broader financial conditions. But when you want to look at specifically money itself, you got to look at the whole curve and you got to do a breakdown between real yields and inflation expectations. So we try to encompass that in our effective monetary conditions index.
My pro take is somebody looking at a $135 million horse ranch in the Hamptons has different effective conditions than half of America trying to figure out where the next paycheck is.
Oh, absolutely. And really also today, there's so much focus on the Fed funds rate, but the reality is Wall Street and corporate America borrows in the 5 to 10 year portion of the curve. They don't borrow in the front end of the curve. The only people that borrow in the front end of the curve are small businesses and households. So you have a major bifurcation in terms of where Fed funds rate.
Okay, but small business on this Friday, small business is getting crushed.
Yes.
Is that an active statement?
Absolutely, and households as well.
Pick it up from there, and so as we look ahead to what the Fed may or may not do in September, talk a bit more about that contrast and the degree to which that's weighing on the Fed's calculus going forward. I mean, you write so wonderfully about that Main Street, Wall Street divide, sort of what it looks like to pick up the pieces going forward.
Well, what it means is the Fed knows the Fed funds rate is too high, not just for Main Street, but also for the economy as a whole now. So they've got to cut, and they want to cut. The only question is going to be, do they get the room to cut because inflation comes down? Because if they cut aggressively and inflation remains sticky, then it's going to look premature. So they have to get the cover from a weaker inflation number. The softer jobs numbers is great in terms of it gives the market some expectations and the curve begins to anticipate the cuts, but they really got to see that inflation move lower. Once that happens, and we do project inflation is going to drop, it's going to come in much more benign.
But isn't that linked right into GDP? I got an Atlanta GDP now. It's not solid. It's on a borderline boom economy. 3%, near 3% GDP.
So, and that tells us that inflation is still going to be sticky somewhere. It's not coming down to 1%, but to come from, say, 3.2 to 2.9, well within the realm of possibility. And that is what the Fed needs to cut in September, a 25 basis point cut, not the 50 that some are looking for.
You don't think of 50?
No, I don't. I don't think there's any reason to cut 50. I think they can go slow and steady, 25 every other meeting, or even if the labor market does show some accelerated softness, 25 every meeting.
Pro tip, and this is classic Satoris here right now, the Bloomberg Financial Conditions Index has really come in, but your proprietary index is not. What's the difference?
Well, so what we're seeing is monetary conditions have actually been easing throughout 2024, and they started easing late 2023 when the Treasury began to shift more of its issuance to the T-bill portion of the curve. Doing that allowed the Treasury to begin to pull liquidity out of the reverse repo facility and stock bank reserves with excess liquidity. And as a consequence, you've seen effective conditions ease upwards of about 75 to 100 basis points in 12 months.
I've been thinking a lot about this over the course of the week. You have a Fed so adamant that they're looking at the totality of the data, and yet all of us are trying to do a little psychoanalysis of the Fed as this is all going on. Sort of, when you see the kind of undulations that we've seen over the last week in the markets, how far behind are they? What more do they need to do? The speculation about the jumbo cut or an intermediate cut. How do they navigate those two things, sort of staying focused on the data all the while having this sort of screaming sense that they need to have done more, they need to do more? How do you dovetail those two things?
I'm not really sure you can.
Yeah.
I got to tread gingerly on this one because I don't think the Fed is doing a very good job of navigating this. I feel like they're exposing some political biases in the institution. And in particular, I often say they have not used the balance sheet anywhere near aggressively enough. And it's almost as if they're hoping, waiting, praying for inflation to come down to give them cover to finally cut the Fed funds rate.
In the minute and a half we got left, I got September 18, November 7th, 2 days after the election, December 18th, roughly 1 month out from the inauguration. It's got to be a political Fed.
It's got to be in the sense that there's no way they can avoid appearing political. Is that the question?
Excuse me. Is that the help me? Is that the question?
I think there's no way they're going to be able to avoid appearing political. And they've already lost that cover. So what do? The best course of action here is 25 in September, and if the data weakens again, you can go 25 in November and then keep cutting 25 every meeting or every other meeting. That's the best course.
Tom Satoris, I can't say enough about it, folks. His research note at Strategas is just the chart. This starts back with that Hyman and Jason Trenner. Chart, paragraph, paragraph. It's absolutely brilliant. Can't say enough about the work at Strategas. Thank you. All right, wait, what did you call it? A jumbo?
Jumbo cut. I think that's like in the parlance now.
Jumbo?
Yeah.
You and Trent.
I haven't made that a thing, but you're using that jumbo cut? No.
I don't see a jumbo cut.
He doesn't see it.
Jumbo cut.
50.
Lisa, do you see a jumbo cut?
I see jumbo shrimp.
Okay, fair enough.
Jumbo cut.
Thank you. Tom Satoris, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated this morning. Huge response. Jonathan, thank you so much. You tell me out here. David Gura. I mean, at Wiscasset, you just got to keep driving because Reds is packed. You get up to Damariscotta, and any mere mortal like you who lives at Freeport at LL Bean, you got to go to Waldoboro and Moody's Diner.
I haven't been, but I've driven by it. Yeah.
A cup of coffee's $2.39. I mean, it's a bargain to say the least. But, you just keep going after Damariscotta. You can feed the kids there for under, $18.
That's the real secret there. Inflation has hit less hard in many corners of that state. But I will say, everywhere you have to go in Maine, it's a 45-minute drive, even if it's just up the street.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the way it is. Good morning to all of you in Waldoboro, Bertha and Percy Moody's Diner. We'll have the Guras there this weekend. Futures deteriorate off my conversation. -15, Dow futures at -61. The VIX 24.07. Do you think the Fed's political? I'm not so sure. I agree with Tom that
I hear the Fed chair's adamance that they're not. But I think picking up on what Tom said, as we get closer and closer to November, it's a harder and harder thing for him to maintain. But of course, he and other people who have worked there are so adamant that it's not. But they're in a tricky corner. They put themselves in a tricky corner.
One thing we've ignored this week, my fault totally, seriously, folks, is the commodity disinflation out there right now. The global commodity weakness is tangible. We'll have to address that on Monday if we show up on Monday. We'll have to see how that goes. We need, is there economic data today to save us, Rich? I don't think so. I think it's a very quiet, I think, it's nothing. I mean, there it is next week. PPI, look to August 14th. The inflation report will be absolutely critical. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks just trying to hold on to that comeback after a really rough week, but it looks like we're pointing to a lower open. Right now, NASDAQ futures down 0.3%, Dow futures down 0.1%, S&P futures down 0.2%. The 2-year yield, 4.01%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.94%, down 4 basis points. Nothing much on the economic calendar for today. Investors now await next week's data. That includes reports on consumer inflation and retail sales. In Asia, the stock rally lost some momentum. The yen temporarily resumed its rise. We have the yen now up about 0.3% at 146.70 against the dollar. Analysts at BNY Mellon say that unwinding of yen-funded carry trades, well, it has further room to run. Then you have JP Morgan says the BOJ will avoid raising rates again anytime soon. We'll go to Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing. Their revenue jumped 45% in July from a year ago on strong demand for its AI chips. Their ADR's up 2%. And then sources say TikTok owner ByteDance getting ready to refinance a $5 billion loan. That could be one of the largest deals for Chinese borrowers this year. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and David.
Lisa, thanks so much. Our economic indicators all into next week, those big inflation reports, always brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor-to-staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support in technology. Okay, here's the romance, folks. This weekend, if I'm lucky, I'll darken the door at the Paris Bistro Match, buying Shirley Temples around for starving children.
I'm sure.
You go around the table. What are you going to have? Steak, 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 steak. Gura's going to be with the cherubs buying lobster, going, how can we get out of here for $80?
Yeah, we'll try.
At the Lobster Hall.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, joining Catherine Greifeld in Paris is Julian Emanuel. This is exciting. You're going over to Paris.
Never been.
You've never been?
I've never been.
My word, it's fabulous. And it's even more so now because we've all observed how successful the Olympics are. Like you're coming in 14, 15 days later, which is cool.
That's okay. Water polo's waiting for us.
I've watched a little of this water. I mean, are you a fan of water polo?
Is it in the river?
No, it's not in the river.
Okay.
But it's in a deep pool, and it's astonishing to watch the athleticism and their ability to tread water for, 30, 40 minutes.
Unbelievable stamina. I mean, really one of the most intense stamina sports there are.
Do you have lots of preparation you two be watching, where to eat and all that?
No, but I'm going to bring a float for
They'll be there watching the game in the water. That's good.
Okay. Les Frenchies is wonderful out on YouTube. LES, that's the.
Yeah, sure.
Nailed that.
Nailed it.
Frenchies, they're really quite good out there. Julian Emanuel in the stock market. Is the bull market dead?
No, not at all. And we've talked about this over the years. Once in a while, every few years, you get a really, really strong signal from the options market. And on Monday morning, before the opening, there was abject panic. And if you look at the last 40 years, every time you buy abject panic, a year later, you've made money.
I got to ask David.
Go ahead,
excuse
please.
me for interrupting. What does abject panic look like at EvercoreISI with Ed Hyman with a black marker in his hand? What does abject panic look like at Fortress Hyman?
Well, we know it looked like VIX hitting 65, but there was a very frank and open debate about whether the Fed was behind the curve and what should they do. And the consensus is that this too shall pass, and the Fed's going to cut in September. And lo and behold, if the Fed actually cuts in September and the recession, which there's still lots of elements of weakness out there forming, and we know that, if the recession holds off until 2025, we certainly think we have further to go in the rally.
Julian, you've written a wonderful note encouraging us to exercise calm at moments like this. How do we do that? What's giving you optimism that this too shall pass?
Well, I think this is, again, one of these very strange times where if you think about the Bank of Japan, Their timing was absolutely awful.
Terrible.
In hiking rates. And the way I think about this, and it really actually makes sense allegorically, is when the Fed first hiked rates in December of 2015, and it was, oops, I did it again. They didn't hike for another year. You actually set off a freeze in the credit markets that was happening anyway because of energy. And then you had an incredibly strong year in 2016. And that's how we see the table setting up. It's, it's pick away at the names and the themes that you like.
What do you say to those who are more pessimistic, shall we say, when they look at earnings from, say, these big tech companies, AI specialists in particular, and worry that the promise of this isn't meeting reality, at least not yet?
Well, look, adoption of AI on the corporate level is slower than we would have expected. But the way we think about it is and Tom, I know you'll remember this because I was there as well, but in the early 90s, you brought your own personal computer to work because corporate America hadn't adopted personal computers yet.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden they did. That's what's going to happen here.
John Author's talking to me about this earlier this week, Tom, saying...
This is on the Big Take.
It is on the Big Take.
Did you see how, do you see how Gura gets a Big Take plug-in
That
every
was like a
27
shameless
minutes?
plug alley-oop that we
Continue,
did.
please.
But making the point that you look at how adoption of the internet went, and that took many years before it became a thing, and all the while you saw these companies kind of fall into the ways. I digress. Go ahead.
No, it's like poetry there for a moment. What you don't know, folks, is Julian Emanuel has the must-read morning note in the equity markets where in one single paragraph he parses out revenue and earnings dynamics. If you get Ed Hyman's economy, don't you get a lower nominal GDP? And do you model out revenue coming in, revenue growth?
It is likely to be slower than it has been, but anything that's, call it, north of 2.5% to 3%, is going to be
because
just fine in this
corporations
environment.
will adapt.
And what's interesting is, and remember, we have been as a society been waiting for this recession for 2 years for the most part. And I would suggest to you that part of the reason that margins have stayed as elevated as they've been is because corporate America has been waiting as well and has already begun the process of adaptation. And so for us, even if we do get a downturn, it is likely to be mild. It will certainly have an effect on the stock market.
I mean, you and Ed have absolutely nailed what we see with an Atlanta GDP now, which is quarter to quarter to quarter to quarter. We underestimate a solid American economy. Do we still see solid relative to the gloom of recession?
We do, and importantly, and again, this, Ed has been at the forefront of the inflation decline call for 2 years now, and lo and behold, after some bumps at mid-year, we're seeing that we're back on the path for the likelihood of inflation. And think about it, what we saw in terms of financial conditions the last couple of weeks, is inflation going to go higher or lower in response to those kinds of conditions? I would suggest the answer is lower.
In the tornado of this week, Michael Gapin from Bank of America came out with a note kind of categorizing the 9 times in recent history we have had these intermeeting cuts. And he, said the 9/11, it's what happened with COVID, et cetera, and he comes to the conclusion we're nowhere near that level of crisis yet. I'd love for you just to comment on this in context. Again, it's been a whirlwind week, big ups, big downs. Put that into sort of a broader historical context, that level of panic or sense of crisis that maybe some investors had over the course of the week.
No, and look, again, when you have volatility, and it wasn't just the equity markets, and it was, Japan's equity market was down 10%. FX went crazy, interest rates went crazy. That kind of, sort of cumulative within the context of thinking about all the events in July that transpired politically, if nothing else, such that we got to a point where earlier this week, everything we were thinking about, virtually everything, was called into question. But you put it all together, and I think, the reason the market responded so positively to the weekly jobless claims, the most on-the-ground statistic, is because the recession is not in sight. And frankly, what this does is what it typically does when conditions get this tight. We all know the Bloomberg Financial Conditions Index, is it resets that wall of worry. And that's very important for bull markets to be feeding on.
You confident there'll be some calm next week when you're overseas watching the Olympic Games? I mean, does it feel like things have kind of equilibrated after this week?
With the VIX in the 20s, still, you can never be confident of the calm, and we've certainly got some very important inflation numbers next week. But we do think that the violence of what we've seen this week indicates that, in all likelihood, the worst of it is over.
Tom, are you of the mind that that jobs number was an aberration? The one that we saw that seemed to
I'm
spook
of a
everyone?
mind to listen very carefully to people like Anna Wong, who are telling us, and Rick Reeder at BlackRock had a spectacular aggregate revisions chart showing how the joy of the pandemic, everybody's dampening down to a different job dynamic, a different job economy. And, I don't know the when of it. I think the when of it, Julian's called 8 of the last 6 recessions. I mean, he's like the pro. It went. Can I give you one YouTube video besides Bloomberg Surveillance?
Of course.
Les Frenchie.
Les Frenchie.
Do one video on the 5 places to have beef bourguignon in Paris, and they start with my favorite. It's just off Rue Dauphine at the river where they swim. You come down Rue Dauphine. It is just tucked into the left there.
So many people can relate to this.
And it's probably sold out.
From the Damariscotta River to the Seine on Bloomberg Surveillance.
2025. But, tell them you'll eat in the kitchen. But it's just your first time.
Do people mistake you for being French when you're there?
No, they don't. Although they don't. Although I've had a lot of feedback from this Def Leppard Speedo.
Yes.
Is swimming in the river. That really got the week started here. Julian Emanuel on his way to Paris to have lunch with Catherine Greifeld as well. She's on some shishi boat somewhere, having, snails and escargot and all that. With an abbreviated news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, Tom, tornado watch in effect for counties in New Jersey and New York State west of Manhattan. This runs till 2 Eastern. This is the remains of Tropical Storm Debbie marched north after drenching parts of the south. Now, potentially dangerous flooding expected from Washington, D.C. all the way north to Boston. One tornado did touch down near Wilmington, Delaware last night. A busy presidential campaign day ahead. Kamala Harris, Tim Walz hosting an event in Glendale, Arizona. Donald Trump leading a rally in Bozeman, Montana today. Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz in Michigan yesterday, speaking to the UAW.
We're not falling for these folks who are trying to divide us, trying to separate us.
And after holding no public campaign event this week, Donald Trump spoke with reporters at his Mar-a-Lago resort, criticizing Harris's intelligence and claiming she's avoiding reporters.
She doesn't know how to do a news conference. She's not smart enough to do a news conference.
Trump taking questions for 1 hour on a range of issues, insisting Republicans do have the momentum in this race. And an earthquake off the coast of Japan's southern island prompting the government to issue its first ever warning for a mega quake from an undersea trough running along a swath of the country's coast. Prime Minister calling off a planned trip to Central Asia out of an abundance of caution following this warning. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. David and Tom.
John Tucker, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance, we're always brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Thank you, Interactive Brokers. In the Interactive Brokers bond marketplace, access their vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities, no markups, or built-in spreads and low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. I'm going to get the beef bourguignon video out for Julian on Twitter,
You'll
on
send
LinkedIn.
it out.
It's great. I've tried all restaurants.
Have you made one before?
I've tried.
Yeah.
I've tried. I have failed. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. The excitement over yesterday's jobless claims report, well, that seems to be losing its steam. Futures falling after U.S. stocks came close to wiping out the week's losses. Right now, NASDAQ futures down 0.5%, 94 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 84 points. S&P futures down 0.3%, or 18 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.02%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.94%. That's down 5 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,428 an ounce. Brent crude, $79 a barrel. WTI crude, $76 a barrel. I have to point out Bitcoin up nearly 1.5%, 60,505. Well, you could soon see more Kia Souls on the road. Amazon, it's added those little boxy vehicles to the company's delivery service partner initiative. And listen to this. Analysts at Morgan Stanley say drinkers are swapping out cognac for tequila. Yeah, cognac's been the weakest performing spirit in the U.S. over the last 12 to 18 months. Drink up. There you go.
Stop. It's just because of George Clooney. He had nothing to do, so he started a tequila thing.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And, I mean, the brand, the beverage single-handedly took off because of one guy.
You know who else has a tequila? The Rock.
The Rock has a tequila? What's it
tequila.
called? Seriously.
Dwayne Johnson.
He does, yes.
I was watching Red 2 with Bruce Willis, and the whole movie, I'm like, where's The Rock?
Oh.
I mean, that's simple. Thank you, Lisa. That was informative. Joining us now, saying, why is he here? Dave Harden joins us now with Summit Global Investments. And like on any given day of the year, 365 days of the year, I'd say this could possibly be a really important Friday to talk to you, because you have to sit in rooms with people and not so much calm them down, but try to steer towards a short-term 3-year perspective, given the modern financial cacophony that we're living. How do you do that, given the modern news cycle, the speed of panic that we have?
It is a challenge, for one, I would say, for sure. I think one of the things you have to do is you have to try to stretch people's vision. Let them see the big picture. For example, this week was Monday morning, terrible. Friday afternoon, we're going to end where we started. It's from last Friday.
Yeah, but the difference is when Perry Tacrina was run in Wellington, and when, at Fidelity, it was the, Peter Lynch and Bettina Dalton and all that, they didn't have to deal with LinkedIn or Twitter or all of us. Lisa's on her cell phone over there to get ready to day trade, Warner Brothers Discovery. How do you help people with that vision of staying on 3 years?
It's very difficult. The first thing that I often say sometimes to individuals is, with the market, if you become a trader, oftentimes you lose money, right? So you want to stay an investor. And an investor has to look past today, right? They have to look long term. They have to enjoy. You often hear the saying, there's joy in the journey, because you might never get to the end, so to speak. You've heard those kind of thinkings. In the market, it's almost the opposite. You have to think of the end and not worry about the journey, because the journey is going to be bumpy.
Sounds like a Taylor Swift song.
Could be. It could be one. Talk about just, Tom's talking about how things have accelerated, but certainly things have become more global as well. So let's go back to Monday, and we know that so much of this is catalyzed or kicked off by what happened in Japan. What are your clients asking about that? How do you convey to them sort of the interconnectedness of all of this?
Well, it's true. Today, one of the biggest things that we've experienced today is the geopolitical risk from all over the world instantly, right? Because of news, because of X, et cetera. And what they don't realize is that the S&P 500 they think is a domestic index, when 50% of the sales, if not more, of the S&P 500 companies come globally, right? So by investing in these 500 companies, you actually have international global exposure. And we're just so connected today. There is no, in my opinion, there is the diversification of domestic versus, outside the U.S. That's no longer the case. You are connected, period. And every company today is talking about where they're going to sell.
I'm going to go here. We're going to rip up the script right now. Dave, you and I go back far enough where we remember the shell game of option writing. Will Schmidt over at the FT today has a great article on how supposedly safe ETFs call writing and option writing to create income actually did pretty lousy in the panic in the week, the 10 days that we've had. Are you at Summit believers in gimmicks, marketing things like target benefit retirement programs or option writing ETFs or leveraged NVIDIA funds? Or how vanilla do people have to be?
Well, I think there is an absolute misconception out there with options, right? A lot of people, at Summit, for example, we manage people's risk. That's what we seek to do. That's what our expertise is managing risk. And one thing that you see is a lot of firms doing options, not realizing that the downside is actually blowing up the whole firm, right? So why would you take risk that one day would absolutely wipe out your whole firm, your whole portfolio, and all your clients? The reality, though, today we have ultra short daily options. We actually at Summit can write daily options that expire within 24 hours.
Do you?
Yes. And think of it this way. Monday, for example, the VIX is at 66. You come in, you can write a put that's over another 7% away from the current strike price that expires that day and collect premium on it. That would be bigger than Black Monday. And we're nowhere near Black Monday. And so the VIX ends Monday at 33. All that premium collect is zero. I mean, is yours. The option expires worthless. So if you can stay with a delta of like a 0.001 in your options, then you're taking a 99.99% probability of winning. You just have to be super disciplined on your sell discipline. You have to, one of the sayings I say a lot when I walk into the trading room with the investment staff is to say, listen, you have to have small losses in order to prevent large losses. If you're not having small losses, then you're trying to prevent you're going to have a large loss.
Yeah, I would summarize this, David. Delta was Helen Reddy, Delta Dawn, if you remember that.
What's that flower
but
you
I
have
would,
on?
I
Could
would
it be a faded rose?
summarize this, folks. As much as I can say it, options is a leveraged transaction, roughly 4-to-1 versus futures 10-to-1. It's an adult swim. I urge everyone to go out and enjoy losing money in options, like moi, so you can understand it's an adult swim. David, sneak in one more.
Last question here. Just we've been through this week where there's been focus on the Fed being behind the curve, concern about the labor market, certainly concern about some of these big name tech companies. Going into the weekend, what do you take away as real from the level of panic or concern that we've had over this last week? What's sort of changed in your thinking over the course of the last week, if anything?
I think the biggest thing for me is, you look at the inverted yield curve that's predicted recessions for the last 45, 30 years, what have you. You look at unemployment rising 50 basis points year over year that's predicted for the last 45. Everything's saying recession.
Yep.
Here's my question that's really arisen in my mind this week. What is the Fed going to do differently this time around? Because we're not in a recession right now, clearly. So what are they going to do differently this time around than they didn't do the last 30 to 45 years? The question is, are they going to do something different? Because if you don't think there's a recession, then you're saying they're going to do something different. What is that?
This has been great, David. Thank you so much. Don't be a stranger with Summit. I can't say enough. Some of the wisdom there in options, folks, we don't talk enough about. As you can tell, I'm not a big fan of option writing. That was an intelligent conversation. David Hardin, he's a Summit Global Investments. Gura's people called me up and they said, look, I know you did Aerosmith yesterday. It's not David's karma. It's not, what he does. And I said, well, give me something modern. I just don't want to do Flat and Scruggs and the Osborne brothers. And they say, Joey Ryan, Kenneth Pattengill. I mean, it's so, there's this whole model like the Lumineers. It's like everybody's earnest over in Brooklyn. Really, really into the scene, right?
Yes. There's a lot of earnestness there.
A lot of milk.
I know you've been once.
Milk carton kids. Who are we playing this for? This is Cash Flow's fave over in China. The Milk Carton Kids for David Gura. Stay with us. An important conversation with David. We'll do that next. Good morning.
To replace all I have made, darkness steals the light I bear, and the hope of a lifetime fades. The hope of a lifetime fades.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, David Gura, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. We welcome all of you on a Friday. It's finally some sense of a quiet Friday. We're going to get through it, prepare for the week, prepare into August, prepare to Jackson Hole as well. Let's get right to it. Futures at -19 from the Interactive Brokers Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got futures pointing to a lower open, and this is after the S&P 500 posted its best day in nearly 2 years. That was thanks to that better-than-expected jobless claims report. Right now, NASDAQ futures down 0.6%, Dow futures down 0.2%, S&P futures down 0.3%. The two-year yield at 4.02%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.94%, and that's down 4 basis points. Moving the markets, David's favorite place, salad green, sweet green. Their shares up 28%, posted sales that outpaced expectations. It also raised its outlook for the full year. Then you have Paramount. Their shares up 4%. Adjusted EPS in the second quarter beat expectation. But the big thing, the company also took on an impairment charge of nearly $6 billion on its cable networks. And finally, online travel company Expedia up 8%. Reported second quarter results that beat expectations. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and David.
Lisa, thanks so much. It is an exceptionally strong and interesting weekend for politics in America. Conversation leadership is at CBS. Not only what Margaret Brennan will be doing on Face the Nation, but a guy named Costa, the first conversation with the President of the United States. David?
Margaret Brennan joining us now. And Margaret, I know that you have the former president's running mate, J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, on your show this weekend. And I'm curious what you're interested in talking with him about. I think about the messaging from the Trump campaign that we've heard this week, particularly focused on Tim Walz's military background. Where do you see that conversation going? Where do you see the potential here to break some news?
Well, you know, we're in the heat of a campaign, and I am sure the vice presidential nominee will do his job as the attack dog on that front, particularly given the closing gap and really competitive race we now see based on our CBS polling that advantage Trump had in many of these battleground states is really narrowed, that Harris has given him a run for his money. So we're going to dig in with J.D. Vance on the changing dynamic that we have seen over the past month, along with who's at the top of the ticket. But I want to dig into a number of policy things with J.D. Vance. I find him very interesting that he has this different flavor of Republican. He's far more populist, calls himself the most pro-union Republican in the Congress. I want to talk to him about that. I want to talk to him about regulation. I want to talk to him about a number of big picture things. You know, everything he's said since he's had a public life is being scrutinized, as happens with every candidate. And he's taken some heat. So I want to talk to him about what he says is his pro-family position, but was explained as an attack on childless cat women.
Has some of that different flavor that you've described, has the potency of it been diminished over the last couple of weeks? How do you see him sort of comporting with or fitting in with the man with whom he's running now?
It's a great question. I mean, we haven't heard Donald Trump really speak in a way that praises J.D. Vance in the recent weeks. You know, as the scrutiny of him increased post his official naming to the ticket, you heard Donald Trump in an interview kind of like play down the importance of the vice president on a ticket, which isn't exactly a strong endorsement. Want to dig into that. And in terms of the business positions, I haven't heard him really be pressed to explain a lot of his thoughts.
Margaret, what's interesting here, and of course, Face the Nation, look for that on Bloomberg Radio, 10 a.m. Sunday morning. You're going to triangulate this. You have the potential Vice President Vance. Mm-hmm. You have Robert Costa with President Biden. I mean, Margaret, you got to get your bookers in line. I expect President Obama to join the show as well. From where you sit with all of your CBS reporting, how Obama-ish is the Harris campaign?
In terms of excitement and enthusiasm, I think that's where people are drawing the comparisons because, frankly, we were coming from a place where a month ago, there wasn't a lot of excitement and enthusiasm on the Democratic side of the ledger about the state of the race and the rematch that few people wanted. It's interesting to see that. You have certainly seen, and it's borne out in our polling data, the reignited interest among Black voters in particular, who weren't necessarily promising to show up on Election Day, but now are feeling enlivened and interested in doing so. Young voters, same story there. So that interesting, she is piquing the interest of the base in a way that we just weren't seeing to date in this contest. And the tilt of the language more towards it's not hope and change, right? Obama style, but more upbeat in terms of vision for America. That is also, I guess, a bit Obama-esque-ish, but this is still really a race where Democrats believe their best ticket is to make it about Donald Trump, less about themselves, and how they express that is sort of the stylistic difference.
Mark, we started off the show and Tom asked me what I was sort of watching, and I said I'm still trying to pay attention to what's happening in the Middle East, and I think something that your show does so well week after week after week, drawing from your broad experience covering the State Department, is focusing on international affairs, international relations, and you had John Feiner on the show last week. You have General McKenzie on this week, and the former head of CENTCOM. What is your sense of the status of things in the Middle East? Everyone's been kind of holding their breath now for many days, but your sense of sort of the state of play, so much as it is in the Middle East right now?
There is so much diplomacy happening behind the scenes to try to keep this in a box. So we know that there could be a retaliatory attack by Hezbollah, the militia based out of Lebanon. That's the most formidable non-state military actor in the region with an incredible stash of weapons against Israel for the fact that Israel assassinated 2 of their leaders recently, along with a leader of Hamas. The idea of Iran jumping into the fight with their new government in place, that is sort of being downplayed by U.S. officials. They're most focused on Hezbollah acting in the next few days. I'm really focused on that because to date, General McKenzie, every time we've had him on since October 7th, has said, watch what Lebanese Hezbollah does. They will be a game changer if they get directly into this fight beyond the tit for tat. So we want to talk about that.
Well, in the arc of Face the Nation, then, do you have the time to talk to Senator Vance about the character, the tinge of isolationist Republican politics that we hear from both President Trump and Senator Vance?
I've had that chance in the past to try to press him on his views, and he really is staunch in the position that America has no interest in Europe, which is interesting given their importance trade-wise, and the importance that China places on Europe right now. He argues it should all be about focusing on Asia. And so it's worth trying to draw him out on that, frankly. I have not really heard him express in detail what his Asia strategy is beyond putting tariffs on China.
Well, thanks so much. Margaret Brennan, it'll be extraordinary. Face the Nation. Look for that across the CBS television network, 10 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio. On Sunday, look for that in New York, Washington, Bloomberg 106.1, Boston, and Newburyport as well, 10 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio, Face the Nation, hugely, hugely successful. The Sunday talk shows as well. David, to me, just extraordinary. The set of, I mean, with Vance, you could do a 2-hour conversation.
And you have Biden there preceding it on CBS Sunday morning, so it'll be a very busy morning.
Right now, it's a busy morning at Singapore in New York. John Tucker with another special news report.
Yeah, extremely humid as it shreds north. A tropical storm, tropical depression Debbie now carrying with it the threat of twisters. And this is what it sounded like as it tore through Washington, D.C. area earlier today. And this tornado watch in effect until early this afternoon for regions now west of New York City. Let's get an update on this now tropical depression. Although weakened, Rob Carolyn, our meteorologist, is still a major threat to the region, is it not?
Especially off to our west, John. The storm is moving from Virginia now up into Pennsylvania, and we are seeing extremely heavy rainfall across west central Pennsylvania, all the way through Williamsport, then generally from Corning, New York, up to about Watertown, through the Adirondacks and into Quebec. This area is going to pick up a total of 3 to 6 inches of rain. And, John, because we're dealing with a post-tropical cyclone, there's turning motion in the atmosphere. As you mentioned, we've got a tornado watch in effect from outside the Washington area to the Delmarva, all the way up through western and central New Jersey and into eastern Pennsylvania. Even parts of Sullivan and Orange County in New York are covered by it. Some of these storms that develop later today may have the potential to produce some weak, short-lived tornadoes that could cause some damage through the late morning and early afternoon.
Yeah, one tornado we saw already touch down in Wilmington, Delaware. That was last night. But the key there, Rob, as you say, is these are weaker circulations, are they not?
That's right, because they're not going to be able to get the potential to turn into supercell storms, John, because the system's moving so rapidly. It's just all due to the motion that's taking place in the lower parts of the atmosphere. It's the residual effect of this having been a hurricane at one point. The air is moving in the right direction, but not as high up in the atmosphere as we would see, say, with a tornado that would develop in the Midwest or the South.
Rob, David Gura here, just wondering sort of what this portends for the rest of the season. Just give us your sense of the busyness of the season that we can expect here.
Well, David, it's been relatively quiet since Beryl because we've had a lot of Saharan dust across the Atlantic. So that prevents the development of the waves coming off of Africa. There's a wave near 37 West that we'll be keeping a watch on over the weekend and into the early part of next week. Some of the models suggest that it may develop into a depression in the Eastern Caribbean and then affect maybe the Central Caribbean or the Bahamas sometime late next week. And then we expect once we get beyond the 15th of the month, we start getting into the high part of the season. August 15th to September 30th is usually when we see most of our development, and we expect it to be a very active season.
Rob, I'm failing again. I'm trying to lose you, and I can't. So there's a desert in the Saharan dust with the wind moving to the west.
Yes.
The dust goes over the Atlantic?
Correct.
And that affects our weather.
It does, because what happens, Tom, is the air is very dry because it's coming off an enormous desert there in North Africa. And some of that dust this season has been able to go as far west as Texas, as it's been blown across Texas. Yes, because what happens is this time of year, the Bermuda High sets up. So you have westerly winds, which have been affecting us during the summer out of the south and west. Right. On the southern side of the high, you have strong easterly flow. So it brings the air off of the continent of Africa and pushes it all the way across the Gulf of Mexico. And it's been these big clouds of dust. We've actually been able to see them on the satellite photos working their way across the Atlantic that has prevented these systems from developing. Any of the systems that have developed so far this season, Tom, have done so in gaps in between those clouds of Saharan dust.
Extraordinary. Rob Carolyn, the best. Thank you so much. Bloomberg Surveillance meteorologist. Every time he shows up, I learn something.
You take out your atlas.
You get out your atlas. Like, seriously. It's like you're driving around in the car going, where's Dan Riscotta? Rob Carolyn there. Bloomberg meteorologist is where Saharan dust.
Saharan dust.
Who knew?
Kickstarting these storms. I didn't till now, but...
Well, the rain droplets need something to adhere to, and it is the dust in the air which forms raindrops.
There we go. Member of the American Society of Meteorologists, John Tucker.
You're going to be stuck in traffic on I-95.
Oh, no, it's
I got new
for
wipers.
this region, it's going to be an absolutely gorgeous weekend.
Yes,
so.
Rob making my day.
Or
and
so
weekend.
they say.
So, Rob, I trust him.
I mean, after this blows through, yes.
Rob Carolyn, thank you so much. Futures at -14, the VIX 24.00. We're on YouTube, Apple CarPlay, and Android Auto. This Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Red on the screen after the markets got this nice push for yesterday's reading on new jobless claims. But some members of the Fed say the report isn't the end all. You had the Fed's Austin Goolsbee says more data is needed to assess the state of the economy. And when it comes to rate cuts, Fed President Susan Collins tells the Providence Journal that it could be coming soon if CPI keeps falling. To futures right now, NASDAQ futures down 0.3%, 70 points. Dow futures down 0.1%, 38 points. S&P futures futures down 0.1% or 10 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.01%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.93%, and that's down 6 basis points. To commodities, spot gold higher, $2,429 an ounce. Brent crude $79 a barrel. WTI crude $76 a barrel. Companies making news. Delta, it says that CrowdStrike tech outage forced them to cancel thousands of flights. Well, it could cost them a lot, $380 million in lost revenue this quarter. Delta down about 0.1%. And a new version of the Mac Mini desktop is on the way from Apple. Bloomberg says it's the smallest desktop ever offered by the company. Apple down about 0.7%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and David.
Perfect timing. I'm glad you mentioned that, Lisa. Mark Gurman out with that report. I've yet to read it, but I guess it's a big deal. They're going to come out with a teens weens fast and fast.
The size of an Apple TV box, I guess.
Yeah, it's like a whole new world after all. Into the games, Catherine Greifeld, Julian Emanuel in Paris. Everybody's there, David, but you, me, and Lisa.
Here we are. 2020, what is it, 2028, I guess. We'll go to L.A. I'll make plans now.
Please do that. It's the Summer Games in Paris. And that update, the Summer Games update, it's brought to you by State Street Global Advisor. We thank State Street Global Advisor for that. They got, it's been a huge, huge success. Out in Chicago is some of the smartest research notes, and what I love about it is they do the usual strategy, economics, finance, investment, and then like the old days, Benrian Capital says, here's some stock ideas, and there are all these things I don't know what they are. They got a whole paragraph from the Chicago White Sox to see what Jerry Reinsdorf should do with that. Shana Sissel joins us now, CEO of Benrian Capital, Chicago. There's a small company at the bottom of your report, Shana, Apple. And you say, just stop it with the gloom, the fog that's out there on Apple. Where and when do we see clarity on Apple for a higher share price?
Well, first and foremost, I can't take full credit for the depth of the notes we send over. I mean, I can in the sense that I know what I want, but I get my investment associate, Connor, to do most of the research for me. So props
Some
to
Midwestern
Connor
modesty there, which I appreciate. That's right.
Well, I'm not even from the Midwest, so I appreciate that. But yeah, so I got to give full credit to our newest team, Connor, because he is fully responsible for how thorough those notes are. But to answer your question in Apple, yeah, I think there was a lot of doom and gloom around Apple, specifically whether or not it was behind the 8 ball with AI. They've addressed that. But now we're talking about, iPhone sales and whether or not, they'll have the same traction as in previous years. And a number of other competitive things on the competitive landscape that Apple's dealing with. But in my opinion, it's a great stock. It has a big moat. Anybody who has an iPhone knows it's really hard to leave the ecosystem. And there's a number of other things, as you pointed out, the mini desktop that they're putting together, and other things that they're working on that I think are going to be positive for the stock.
Right.
So I use these opportunities of doom and gloom to add to a position.
Well, how did that change with your clientele with the panic that we saw ages ago, like 5 days ago? I mean, how did you guys are pretty savvy out there. How did the clients adapt to the panic of Monday?
Well, by the time the panic of Monday had set in, we had already rebounded. So the majority of our clients are financial advisors who are dealing with their own clients, and we help them really with risk management and defensive positioning in portfolios. So we look like heroes through that period of time, as most of the positioning that we had actually did quite well. Now, you guys know me well enough to know that I'm a big fan of NVIDIA, which is one of the stocks that got absolutely hammered during that period. But because a lot of the other stuff that we do is not as risk on, if you will, we were able to kind of ride that wave well, and we really didn't have to deal with any like customer freakouts.
Shana, just lastly here, give me a sense of your optimism or your belief in NVIDIA. I know there were a lot of people who thought this was maybe the bud coming off that rose, that AI hasn't kept up with the promise that a lot of people think that it would have or should have at this point. Why do you still see it in such a positive light? What's your message to those who are doubting the long run of NVIDIA?
Well, first off, anyone who's ever used any sort of AI tools, I know we at Bonrian are implementing AI tools in our technology platform as well as in the tools we use to actually execute our services. You got to train them, folks. It's not like it just pops out of a box and it works. It's called machine learning for a reason. So it takes time, right? And so it's a long-term trend. It's not going to change. There's a big ramp up that is required because you have to teach it. It has to learn. And sometimes it makes a lot of mistakes in the beginning. And so you have to fix those mistakes. And again, first time we used our AI tool that we use for due diligence, it took like 3.5 months just to get it to give us the output without doing it in third person. So, it's a long start up, and these aspects of AI that NVIDIA really supports need NVIDIA chips. It's not changing. This long-term trend is for real.
Shana, thank you so much. Shana Sissel with the Banrian in Chicago today. Neil Dutta out with a blistering note. He goes to Stock and Flow, the bathtub model that Gura flunked at Chapel Hill years ago. But the basic stock and flow on unemployment in the American labor economy, Dutta is scathing. He says the scale of complacency among many commentators, the risks are elevated and stay elevated until the Fed gets to the right side of the story. That's the kind of notes I think we're going to see over the weekend. There's some real heat out there. We generally, with a VIX 23, heal from what we saw 5 days ago.
I pick up on what we heard over the course of the morning. A lot of folks saying, yes, the data are going to be important next week, but the comments that we hear from the Fed are going to be as well. And we were talking a few minutes ago just about the political pressures that might be being exercised on the Fed, how the Fed is maintaining its adamance that it's independent in the face of all of that. But again, they're in a very difficult spot here. I'm very curious to see, certainly in Jackson Hole, what the Fed chair says about the path forward here. But yeah, how do they get on the right side as you see it? What does that entail? That's talking more clearly about the path forward, or?
Yeah, but people hear me talk about ex ante, ex post, which is not my phrases. That's part of the canon. But the answer is there's this huge media hope that people will get ex ante before the fact. And the fact is every bit of central bank history I've seen is some form of ex post. Now the ECB is doing an ex post in a different manner because they don't have a fiscal policy and they fight like cats and dogs. That's what, Lagarde and company have to herd them in a different way than they do here. But the answer is they're decidedly after the fact. And, and I've mentioned it today, we'll do it with Ben Emmons, but the basic idea here, David, is the GDP statistics don't give them an all clear to cut rates. Neil Dunn has fallen off his chair listening to this right now. Totally disagrees with what I say.
What is the bathtub model?
The bathtub model.
Give me the clinic.
It's used widely among all different ideas within macro and microeconomics. But you've got the bathtub, which is a stock, and then sometimes you use soap with the children. Sometimes you just dunk them.
Depending on my level of fatigue. Yeah.
You take the plug out. And then you have flow.
And
the
you're
flow
checking
in
the rate.
And the flow out.
Gotcha.
Rate, very good. Very calculus. They're very first derivative. It's very...
dx, dy.
Very good. And of course, in surveillance, we're not in a continuous space. We're in a discrete space. Good morning, Tom Secunda.
It is a discrete space.
So here it is. Here it is, delta y, delta x. Calculus on an August Friday. Always a successful ratings reach. On YouTube, on Apple CarPlay, on Android Auto. Stay tuned. The Calculus Hour next.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and David Gura with your opening bell report. Now, yesterday's jobless claim report, it gave the markets this good lift, helping the S&P 500 post its best day in nearly 2 years. But it seems to be losing its excitement a little bit. Futures have been falling all morning. How will the markets react to end off this trading week? Let's get right to it. We'll start with the S&P 500. Well, little change, down 2 points, 5,315. The Dow down 0.1%, 70 points at 39,373. And the Nasdaq down 0.1%, 30 points, 16,630. We go to the 2-year yield, 4.01%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.92%, and that's down 6 basis points. We have commodity spot gold higher, $2,431 an ounce. Brent crude, $79 a barrel. WTI crude, $76 a barrel. To currencies, we have the dollar weaker. Japanese yen up about 0.4% at 146.62 against the dollar. Bitcoin up more than 1% at 60,340. And at the open, I want to check in with Paramount. Their shares right now up 3%. It took that impairment charge of nearly $6 billion for its second quarter. There you go. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report.
I haven't talked that much about it. We'll get to it here with David Gura in for Paul Sweeney. $15 billion in entertainment write-downs. We'll do that here in a bit. Ben Emmons is with FedWatch Advisors, and the problem is the note is not long. It's modestly of duration, but every sentence is worth reading. He has been particularly acute on the linkage of the festivities of Japan and Asia into what the Fed is and what the market will be. The Dow negative 77, as Lisa mentioned. I've got a yen 146.67, stronger yen today. Ben, there's a single sentence in your note where you need to see proof of concept, a weaker 148 yen. To be clear, we haven't got to the weaker yen you need.
No, we haven't, Tom. Good morning. It's really an interesting dynamic, right? The yen is determining, I guess, where the Fed may be heading or not, at least from a market perspective, not from the Fed's perspective, because that's interesting. The last few days, all Fed speakers have come out, have not responded to what we saw happening on Monday, which I do think was a real distress point. But the yen seems to be central here. And yeah, it is the system that we're in. It's a leverage system. It is this yen carry trade that's been with us for many, many years. I think when I started working in the 1990s is when long-term capital management was pioneering that trade, and so the first unwind of that. So it again matters today, Tom. I think it really is about interest rate differentials and about monetary policy, and the yen is currently in the driver's seat.
Well, let me rip up the script there because you went to 1998. Do you detect shadows or excessive leverage in the system that leads to the upsets of the 90s?
To an extent, I do, because the positioning is substantially even larger than it was at that time with the data that we have today. When you take the data from the IMF that shows what Japan has borrowed from yen and putting it out there in risk was over 4 trillion. Some other data from Deutsche Bank and DTC that shows that the foreigners have borrowed yen up to 10 trillion and put it out in risky assets, right? So the magnitude is substantially larger than at that time. Yet, I think long-term capital management was very unique at that moment. It was the first real, innovative firm in this space. There's a lot of other firms today. I think what Bloomberg has reported, it seems to be very quant-driven as sell-off currently, but we don't know exactly who that is. And that's, I think, the difference from the LTCM episode. So it seems to be more like a technical feature currently, but there are shades, so there are shadows, no question. This trade is substantial.
I'd love to ask you just about the challenges for the Fed right now as they look at these other major central banks on decidedly different pages than they. So you look at what happened with the Bank of England, certainly we've talked about the Bank of Japan. How does that complicate Fed Chair Jay Powell and his colleagues' plans going forward, knowing that directionally everyone seems to be going somewhere else?
Yeah, it does, David, because the fact that we had this financial stress, if you will, over the last few days, the Fed has to an extent, take that into account, right? Because it can affect the economy. A VIX at 65 on Monday is unnatural and may indeed impact data. So, and it is born out of basically what happened with the Bank of Japan meeting, which turned out to be a surprise for many that they did raise rates and they signaled they want to raise rates further. So as they do that and we're getting market volatility here that could impact the economy, this does make the Fed's job somewhat more complicated, how to remove policy restriction. If you listen to Collins today as one example, or Goolsbee the other day, they all know that they can take off some of the restriction, but the push to get to that seems to be really driven by the markets on the one hand taking stock of volatility that could affect the economy, and the Fed being, okay, how much can we really do unless we just ignite more of this volatility because of removing it too fast, too quickly, and you get even more risk-taking. I think if you look at what happened from Monday till today, what's up so far, it's Bitcoin, it's cannabis, it's all these risky assets up about 8-10%, right, of one volatility shock. So that show, as expectations for rate cuts are being really aggressive, that risk-taking really quickly comes back into the market. So the Fed has to walk that tightrope, and not a simple task.
I wanted to ask you about the political pressures on this Federal Reserve. We heard from the former president yesterday saying that, were he to be elected again, he would plan to exert a bit more pressure. My words, not his, on the Fed chairman, that he thinks that he has a particular insight into where interest rates should be and what the central bank should be doing. There's that element of political pressure. Then, of course, as we just near the election, it becomes more and more difficult, I think, for the Fed to escape the perception that it might be moving politically. What's your read on that, the purported political nature of the Fed here? And I think about this kind of in the swirl of that conversation about the potential for there being an intermediate cut. It does strike me that were there to be one, it would be closer to now versus when the election would be. Is that at all coming into the calculus, coming into the Fed's thinking at this point? I know we've heard the Fed chair push back so fervently against allegations that it might be swayed or moved or motivated by politics as we get closer to November.
Yeah, in fact, actually, David, when he said that on the panel, I think it was either on Sintro or another panel, that he really made a real explicit point there saying we can cut rates in November because we're driven by this data, right? If the data warrants it, we will do it irrespective of the election. And I think he takes that position simply to having the flexibility to lower rates if the economy really is asking for it. But yet this politicization, as you mentioned, is really close here now. I mean, everybody's watching this very carefully, and we know this window for the Fed to act here is very narrow. And so why markets are calling for intermediate cuts, right? That's, I think, one of the main reasons why that is. And so, it's going to be continued pressure on the Fed politically, and Trump just ramped it up last night, right, clearly.
Ben, before Monday, I thought Jackson Hole would be, lovely. Lisa Bramwitz would go canoeing, hit a trout over the head with her paddle and all that. All of a sudden, it's got substance. Let me rephrase. What would you like to hear from Jerome Powell at Jackson Hole?
I think, like anyone, you do find you want to have some level of forward guidance, right? That we're getting more clarity on, that they're really are making this step forward because they feel that they really have got to the point that policy restriction has gone far enough to not do more collateral damage than may already have been done. Because we can tell from the employment data, a year ago, 5.9 people were unemployed. Today, 7.1 million, right? So in a year's time, more than 1 million people being unemployed for a longer period of time does show the impact from their restrictive policy. So the guidance is really important, Tom, I think. And this conference is about the transmission of monetary policy and the effectiveness of it.
Right.
So that's, I think, plays into that discussion that he will highlight, right? And we know how Jackson Hole can function as a platform for policy signals. So it could well be happening that he does give us guidance.
Ben Emmons, thank you so much. FedWatch Advisors this morning here, an eventful moment. I'm looking at the 10-year real yield, really fixed it, 1.82%, but certainly a higher yield across a healing week. With our news in New York City, John Tucker.
All right, Tom, David, Lisa, tropical depression Debbie draped across the Virginia-West Virginia border early today, and had finally picked up speed as it threatens to sweep through upstate New York and across northern New England and southern Quebec through Saturday. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn says a tornado watch has been extended from the Washington area into northern New Jersey.
There's turning in the atmosphere, so any of the thunderstorms that fire up through 2 o'clock this afternoon, they do have the potential for some rotation and the ability to produce some weak tornadoes, so that's why we're concerned in the corridor stretching from northeastern Virginia right up through eastern Pennsylvania and into western New Jersey.
Debbie, which first came ashore in Florida as a hurricane on Monday, has killed at least 7 people and pushed more than 100 rivers into flood stage. Former President Trump says he's agreed to 3 debates with Vice President Kamala Harris next month. Trump had previously suggested he didn't see a need to debate Harris, but in an hour-long news conference at Mar-a-Lago, the former president saying he wants to debate her September 4th on Fox, September 10th on ABC, and on NBC September 25th.
I just look forward to these debates. I think it's very important that we have them. I hope she agrees to them.
After former President Trump's news conference, Vice President Kamala Harris said she already has agreed to at least one of them.
I'm glad that he's finally agreed to a debate on September 10th. I'm looking forward to it, and hope he shows up.
But a Harris campaign official says the vice president won't agree to an earlier debate on Fox. The campaign says it'll discuss further debates if Trump appears at the ABC debate September 10th. A third teenager has been arrested in connection with a foiled attack on a now canceled Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna. The 18-year-old taken into custody after allegedly being in contact with the main suspect. Authorities say the plot appeared to be inspired by Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Investigators found bomb-making materials at one of the suspect's homes. Officials say the suspect confessed to planning to kill as many people as possible outside the concert venue. 3 sold-out concerts were canceled this week because of the plot, devastating Swift fans from across the globe. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it, with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg. David and Tom.
Thanks so much, John Tucker. Down negative 141. The VIX 23.94. All is good. I can't remember who's now in the Big Ten, the SEC,
and the ACC is now no longer remotely confined to the Atlantic coast.
There's peace across the land.
Okay.
November 30th. There are things that continue.
Yeah.
Purdue, small school.
Heard of it.
It's on, some west side of Indiana. Mm-hmm. They will visit the Indiana Hoosiers for football.
In Bloomington?
Yes.
Okay.
Purdue, Indiana, in a football.
Do you have an allegiance to either team?
I have a contractual allegiance, and I am told to boil her up at a high level. But, coming up, we're going to talk the academics into the season. It's that time.
It is.
I mean, when do your kids go back?
Not till after
August
Labor
15th?
Day. But I think that we're an anomaly. I think I grew up in the South, and I would have been back in school weeks ago now.
What's this week? Totality. That's the word this week.
Yeah.
Totality. I was talking about the totality of the lack of reading of the summer reading list.
Oh, yeah.
Last night.
What do we have? A lot of fiction, nonfiction?
We're very good. We're very Hemingway this year.
Okay.
Which I said is good. She goes, I don't want to read Hemingway. Afterthought goes, I don't want to read it. I said, Hemingway shorts.
Yes,
say thank you.
It is.
They're not giving you War and Peace.
Faulkner next summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we are. So that's your, it's there. Lisa, is anybody at the Mateo house, or we got summer reading list going, or?
She did, and one of the books actually on the summer reading list was a biography about Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, wow.
Some great literature.
That's from the canon.
And she said, who is this Bruce Springsteen guy?
Oh, no.
And I said,
Are you kidding?
No.
She's been kicked out of New Jersey.
That's
out of the family.
Yes.
We'll have to see. Anyways.
Waiting for the Bon Jovi biography.
Yes, I know.
That's out on streaming.
Is it?
It's actually really interesting.
Yeah, I passed the Bon Jovi service station on the Garden State Parkway.
Did you?
That's not true, is it?
Oh, it is true. In New Jersey, we name our service stations.
And there's
after
an Auntie Anne's and
our favorite sons and daughters.
Yeah, well,
we don't have
that's
time
how we
to
honor them.
The way he developed his first single is iconic. This only could happen in New York City. It's very cool. Would you like to comment on the Bon Jovi effect of the New Jersey economy?
Well, I see him taking out his trash every week or so. Oh, yeah.
Very good.
The Bloomberg Bon Jovi report.
Next week, look for that from John Tucker. Right on the screen, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. A wild week for markets, ending with losses on Wall Street. The S&P 500 is on track for a fourth straight week of losses. Traders remaining cautious. At Bank of America, Michael Hartnett says the turbulence in global financial markets, well, it's yet to reach proportions that would signal worries about a hard economic landing. Right now, we have the NASDAQ down 0.2%, 44 points. The Dow down 0.3%, 154 points. The S&P 500 down 0.2%, or 14 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.03%. That's little change. And the yield on the 10-year, 3.93%. And that's down 5 basis points. Moving the markets, Sweet Green, it's up 24%. Served up a sales increase of 9% for the latest quarter, well above expectations. Expedia up 7%. Better than expected results, but it did warn of softening travel demand. And finally, TSMC, that it is down about 0.5%. Revenue jumped 45% in July from a year ago. Strong demand for AI chips. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and David.
Lisa, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Well, on YouTube, you can tell she's wearing red. There is no other color wardrobe in her closet. Joining us now, Pamela Whitten, president at Indiana University, the executive producer of Bloomberg Surveillance with John Farrow, is a sterling graduate of Kilroy's at Kirkwood.
Didn't know that.
At Indiana University. Joining us now, Pamela Whitten. Pamela, there are two sides to every university across this nation. And for you, it's Hoosier hysteria on October 18th to get back to the cadence of a campus, the academics, your world-class theater department, all the engineering you're doing, and also what occurred on Dunn Meadow last year and the huge battle you had with faculty over a rhetorical moment. Is Indiana University calmer as you go into the fall term?
Well, good morning. Good morning. Thanks so much for the chance to talk about Hoosier Nation at IU. Like all universities, we across the U.S., we've all experienced the opportunities and the challenges of everybody expressing themselves in ways that are important to do to respect the opportunity for free speech. And at IU, that's a value we have. It's a value we'll continue to have. But we also recognize that we've got to do that balanced with making sure everybody is safe and that university operations are not disrupted. So we did some really good collaborative work over the summer across our campuses with all constituents. And our Board of Trustees just passed a pretty thorough policy for us just within the last few weeks that frankly makes it clear to everybody what the rules are moving forward. And so we think we're in good shape, and we're excited really about a wonderful upcoming fall semester.
President Whitten, let me ask you about the thanklessness of being a university president. I note that there are a lot of openings at campuses across the country right now, and so many of them, including my alma mater, Cornell, have decided they're going to postpone that search for a couple of years, maybe till the dust settles, maybe until people think that these jobs have more appeal. Could you speak to that, just the way that this job has changed and the pressure that you and others in your position are under at this point? It is a different environment, a different atmosphere where you've got vociferous alumni, students speaking up. You have a lot of constituencies that you have to appeal to, and I wonder if you could just speak to the challenges of that and why, despite all of that, this is still a job that you so evidently love.
Well, you're right. Higher education has changed a lot in the last couple of decades. I've been in higher ed since the 90s when I started my career as a good old college professor and just love that time as well. But the world has changed, right? And so what we see and we face in terms of strong opinions and challenging ways things are communicated and the way, misinformation moves around social media, et cetera, I don't think we're that different than any other place, frankly, around the world as well. And it's always about the North Star, right? If you love the opportunity to shape and to set a vision for preparing students for just incredibly wonderful lives professionally and personally, then you want to be in higher education. If you love the opportunity to shape the direction of research and discovery that changes lives, you want to be in higher education. And from the perspective of IU, if you recognize, as the state's flagship institution, and I really believe in public higher ed personally as well, and the role the flagship plays
Right.
in making sure your state, in our case, Indiana, is a better place to live. You want to be in public higher education. So it's about keeping your eye on the prize and recognizing that in the end, there are
Right.
common outcomes that we really all want.
You lead in your note with this disease that's out there that kids are just floating through. That's a phrase my mother used years ago. Now, you had a guy named Bullard who took a PhD at Indiana University, and he's at another school a bit north, I think. Can't remember what school James Bullard's at right now. But Pamela, the laureate Eleanor Ostrom, who I was honored to speak to the day she won the Nobel Prize, is about the rigor of Indiana economics. Tell us how you're bringing rigor to economics and how you're crowbarring undergraduates into, hey, it's not a party school, you're here to study.
So first of all, I have to make sure that you are clear, because most people aren't, on the breadth of Indiana University. So we are actually Indiana University in Bloomington, 47,000 students. We're now IU Indianapolis Research University in Indy, another 25,000 students. 5 regional campuses, 2 sub-regional campuses. The biggest medical school in the country is at IU.
Is Purdue, I have to interrupt, is Purdue a regional campus of Indiana University?
Well, I think it probably wishes it.
Okay. There we go. Continue on the rigor that you're demanding.
And so we have different campuses with different missions and different types of students as well. And as our students come in, we've really upped the game for them in terms of expectations when they study. But also, we own a lot of that ourselves, and we recognize that you really have to be forward-thinking in addressing how students need to learn moving forward. It can't just be the traditional old-fashioned way in the classroom. So, for example, we have agreements with almost 9,000 partners to make sure that our students are engaged and have opportunities not only inside the classroom, but outside the classroom, so they're career ready when they move forward. We just announced a new co-op program. You're probably familiar with the Kelley School of Business, truly a gem, one of the best in the country. If you come to Kelley in Indianapolis now, you can study in a co-op, which is an opportunity to work with business throughout our state and beyond, which is just amazing. So we are expecting them to come in ready, but we want to own making sure they have an amazing experience as well.
Pamela Whitten, Indiana University, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg Surveillance today. Really greatly.
She said go Hoosiers there at the end. I don't know if you caught that.
She did. I missed that.
Send that to Rachel.
Okay, we'll do that. That was good. It's a great school. Amy Rosen went there and survived. And, I had no idea they had 25,000 people in Indianapolis.
All those campuses, yeah.
Did not know that. We're doing this, folks, occasionally here in Bloomberg Surveillance. So many of you are in education, or you got offspring going to education.
Some checks to write.
That we're going to do it. And there's an Indiana bias here, but we'll have to expand that out. We may maybe go high above Cayuga's waters.
Let's do it.
To talk to
yeah.
them. Get Scarlet Fu in here and do that. Are you doing the big take today, or do you slide out of here?
I'm not. I'm sliding out of here. I'm going to head back and head out
to
pick up my daughter from camp and have a couple of days off next week. But it's in good hands, and some good shows lined up next week. And I think politics will continue to drive a lot of
what Margaret Brennan was talking about. 10 a.m. Sunday on Bloomberg Radio. Extraordinary morning for CBS with Senator Vance and President Biden attending different conversations.
I think what we'll get out of that conversation with President Biden is just a better sense of how he intends to spend these next 6 months, because he addressed that kind of sweepingly in that somber speech that he gave in the Oval Office. He continues to stay in the job, a bit of a melancholic speech.
I bet we'll
get some detail on what the lame duck, he is a lame duck, get that out of the way, but how does he intend to spend the next 6 months?
Yeah, I agree. And as I just said, this is original territory. We've never been here. Plain and simple.
And
all of us.
We see him continuing to work with leaders in the Middle East. I think that the thing that he wants is to broker some sort of deal for Middle East peace, which we should all, of course, be behind. But we'll see if that's the thing that preoccupies him over the next half year.
Lester Flatt. Scruggs. I mean, they did it. What a paycheck the Beverly Hills was for that.
Yes. Always fun to do this, Tom.
It's good. You didn't bring your fiddle.
No.
Flatt and Scruggs, iconic from the 60s.
Poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground come a bubbling crude. Oh, black gold, Texas tea.